apologize for that. Earlier in the evening, we convened at 5:30 p.m. For executive session, and we are now returning to open session, I believe 6:35 p.m. In any case, welcome back. We're in a new school year. Hope everyone had a restful and restorative summer. We're looking forward to getting down to business once again. For those that were interested in the executive session earlier, we did adjourn to speak about collective bargaining strategy with the United Steelworkers of America, Local 8751. Now that we are moving to open session once again, I want to remind folks that tonight's meeting is being broadcast live by Boston City TV on YouTube, as well as Comcast Channel 24, RCN Channel 13, and FiOS 1962. It will be rebroadcast at a later date. If you'd like to speak this evening but have not yet signed up, please see our staff person, Ms. Lena Parvex, in the hallway. Sign up for comment this evening will close at 6:30 p.m. And I note as I'm reading that it's now 6:35 p.m., but we'll allow 5 extra minutes if anyone that hasn't had an opportunity to sign up would like to step out and see our staff person. First, we're going to begin this meeting with the approval of minutes from the July 16th school committee meeting. If the minutes are approved as presented, hard copies will be made available immediately in the hallway with the other handouts. If changes are made, you can access the minutes tomorrow on the BPS website. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the July 16th meeting as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Is there any objection to approving the minutes by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Now we'll move on to the release of executive session minutes. As we do periodically about once per year, BPS Legal Counsel reviews all of the outstanding executive session minutes and is recommended for executive session minutes for public disclosure at this time. So at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the executive session minutes of December 14th, 2016, December 6th, 2017, June 27th, 2018, and July 2nd, 2018, as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Oliver Davila. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Is there any objection, to approving the minutes by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We'll move on now to the interim superintendent's report. I present to you our interim superintendent, Ms. Laura Brill.
Thank you, Chairman Lecanto, members of the school committee. It's good to be here with all of you tonight. It is back to school season for the Boston Public Schools, and that means it's the time of year that our teachers, staff, and parents, and even our students, despite the end of summer vacation, get excited about. But I want to start out on a serious note. One of the topics that has understandably been on everyone's mind is school bus transportation. We know this ourselves through the work that we do. We are hearing it from parents. We understand the demands that this places on school leaders, and believe that this is incredibly important, because what is most important about our work is what happens inside our school buildings. And so getting our children safely and promptly back and forth to school is a necessary precondition for the work that our staff have been preparing for all summer, which is to welcome our children into the learning environments inside our building. We take this very seriously. We are working diligently at it, despite the challenges that we are all aware of. As many of you know, we are continuing to engage in active and ongoing negotiations with the Bus Drivers Union, United Steelworkers, Local 8751. We do have a standing commitment not to speak publicly about details pertaining to collective bargaining, but I would like to remind the public that we are very much engaged with the union. Both parties, including our vendor TransDev, as well as the union, have been diligently engaged in ongoing discussions. I know that many families and staff are concerned about on-time performance for our school buses, even amid these ongoing conversations. There are always challenges at the first week of school, but that does not mean that we are content with any performance delays. We understand the very real impacts that delays have on our students, family, and staff. And I say this as a longtime BPS parent whose children also rode the yellow school bus. However, we are striving and continue to do better around the operational management of this incredibly important priority. We have increased the number of call takers this summer in preparation for the school year in our transportation call center from 32 to 40. On the morning of the first day of school, the average call center wait decreased from 18 minutes last year to 14 minutes this year. That is, that being said, I've heard of cases where parents waited significantly longer than that, and we are working very hard to address that. But I do want to let you know how closely we monitor that. Additionally, our on-time bus performance, while not 100%, is ahead of last year's benchmarks, but still not where we want it to be. And I want to say that very clearly and transparently. On the morning of the first day of school, this past Thursday, the very first day, the buses were 51% on time versus 41% on time last year. The other number we measure carefully is those buses arriving within 15 minutes of on time. That was 80% this opening day. The on-time percentage increased to 71% on the morning of the second day of school on Friday, with 93% arriving within 15 minutes. By Monday, the third day of school, the morning on-time performance was at 80%, and within 15 minutes had reached 96%, and the afternoon numbers were similar. Yesterday, the first day of kindergarten, is always a little bit of a dip, and that was true as well. That happens every year. But those numbers were 71% and then rose to 91% within 15 minutes in the morning, and 79% in the afternoon, rising to 94% within 15 minutes on the back end of the day. Are these numbers great? No, not at all. But these increases do show the ongoing and consistent effort by our transportation staff, which is consistent with the onset of every school year with new buses on the road, new drivers on the road, new students in our schools. But it is our ongoing commitment to focus on these operational numbers, to continue to and work closely with our vendor, Transdev, to ensure that these numbers continue to improve as we settle into the first full week of the school year and beyond. Despite the challenges, I do want to thank and acknowledge the staff in our transportation department. All of these folks work from very early in the morning, from 4:45 or 5 a.m. and well into the evening under stressful conditions. Stressful because we take very seriously our responsibility to demand, respond, and ensure that every child is safely home. I'd like to thank each and every one of these employees for the work that they do and extend that to all of the staff here in Bowling, but particularly those out in our schools who work tirelessly, and I do mean tirelessly, to make sure the first few days of the year go as smoothly as possible. And on that note, I want to shift gears off of transportation to the ongoing work between central office and our schools, not just to prepare for the new school year, but also to look carefully at our ongoing work for the coming school year. There is an enormous reservoir of talent within central office and throughout the district, particularly in our schools. This summer, I've hosted 11 principal listening sessions, reaching 72 of our school leaders in my first few weeks in this role, along with central office listening sessions across nearly every department and with more to come. I've also been meeting and will continue to meet with numerous community groups, staff, and families. Last night, I spent time with the teacher leaders on the BTU academics committees, and I just came from a brief meeting with the BTU building reps. All of these conversations are helping to inform my understanding, as well as that of my team, of some of the strategic shifts needed in central office to most effectively support our schools and our students. I want to thank everyone who has taken the time already to share their experiences and recommendations, and particularly to the many who've offered problem-solving approaches to our shared challenges. As the interim superintendent, I understand that it is my responsibility to listen carefully, to make important and sometimes difficult decisions when necessary, and most importantly, to leverage the expertise, talent, resources, and commitment to public education on behalf of our students and families that our staff and teachers lead so impressively in our schools. That is what I've endeavored to do over the last 2 months and the approach I'll use to guide the work that we will do together in the coming school year. In the coming months, I'll continue this listening, and I hope staff, faculty, and community members will continue to engage with me and with all of us at BPS, making recommendations, pushing me and pushing others, while also working with us to problem solve and identify solutions. I believe that is our best hope for decisions that serve the interests of our students and advance the mission of the Boston Public Schools. That being said, it has also been an exciting week for all of our teachers and staff in the BPS as we did welcome all of our 57,000 students back into our buildings. And what happens inside our school buildings is incredibly important as well. So I want to thank all of the staff, faculty, and school leaders who've worked so hard to prepare for this school year. On the first day of school, Mayor Walsh joined me and numerous members of the BPS team who fanned out to many schools, greeting students, families, and staff. We started the day on Thursday at the English High School in Jamaica Plain, where we were, of course, greeted by the terrific school marching band, but also got a wonderful tour from the new headmaster, Caitlin Murphy, who particularly highlighted some of the school's successful career technical education pathways. We also stopped by the Perkins School in South Boston, led by Massachusetts Elementary Principal of the Year, Craig Martin, before heading off to both the Adams and the Otis schools in South Boston, and the countdown to kindergarten celebration for our youngest students there. On Tuesday, the first day of kindergarten, I was out at the Mildred Ave School, the Winthrop, and the Higginson. Some of the things that we saw while out and about in these schools, the 21st century furniture, which all of our schools are receiving this year as part of the $13 million allocation from Build BPS. Examples include adjustable desks and tables that teachers can move around in the classroom, ergonomic chairs, and portable teacher lecterns, all designed to be flexible to encourage collaborative learning in our classrooms. It should be noted that since 2017, the city and the BPS have spent more than $45 million to carry out major system repairs of school buildings through Build BPS, through the Build BPS process, with assistance from the Massachusetts School Building Authority's Accelerated Repair Program. This meant replacing 3,000 windows, repairing roofs and boilers at 6 schools, including this past summer, and with 6 more beginning in the coming year. As I've stated before, one of my major priorities as interim superintendent is to move forward with a transparent and authentic process on Build BPS so we can re-engage this important citywide conversation about the future of our schools, but it is nonetheless important to note some of these early projects that are already in the pipeline to repair the buildings that we do have and will need into the future. Also new this school year was the expansion of the My Way Cafe school meals program. In collaboration with the Shaw Family Foundation this summer, the City of Boston's Public Facilities Department renovated kitchens in schools in Mattapan, Roxbury, and East Boston. This expands the program to a total of 30 schools, which can now prepare and cook meals on site. What really struck me the most about the first day of school is seeing the smiles on the faces of students, parents, teachers, and staff of all ages and backgrounds. It's a reminder of how eager everyone is to start the new year off right, and how we all share in the collective effort to provide the best possible learning environments for our students. I cannot express in words how much effort the staff has put in over the summer to make sure the first day of school went as smoothly as it did, and as a former BPS parent, I know firsthand how much preparation goes on at home as well. So I'm equally grateful to all of the families who entrust their children to the Boston Public Schools and who create the positive learning environments that happen in our school buildings. I also have to give a huge hat tip to our custodians. I've mentioned many of our staff, but to get our buildings ready to welcome our children. And with that, I want to hand things over to my colleague, Mary Driscoll, because as I talk about the staff welcoming our students into the new school year, we have 17 new school leaders who we would like to honor tonight. And so Mary Driscoll, the Assistant Superintendent for Elementary and Middle Schools, is here to join me for that.
Thank you. Good evening. It's great to see everyone back after what hopefully was at least a bit of a summer hiatus for everyone. So I am very excited to have the pleasure to introduce, it's actually not 17 now, it's 18. We added one just since this afternoon. So in order to do this, I'm going to ask my colleagues, the academic superintendents, to come up so they can help with the introduction. So if the academic supes would just come up. So I want to start by introducing this team. These are the team of people who support the school leaders. They're out in schools every day doing deep dives, coaching, and some of them will be familiar faces and some of them are new faces. So I'm excited to reintroduce or introduce them to you. First, we have Christine Landry, who is supporting elementary schools. Andrea Zayas, who has joined us from New Orleans, who is also supporting elementary schools. Grace Way, who joined us last year, is supporting elementary schools, as is Linus Guillory, who joined us from Rochester. And we're excited to have those new members to the team. We also have Richard Chang, who has stepped out of his own school to support high school headmasters. And Tommy Welsh, who has stepped into the role of supporting particularly our leaders in alternative schools. Not with us tonight, Kelly Hung, who is supporting elementary schools, and Jody Fortuna, who's also supporting elementary schools, and then Joel Boyd, who is supporting high schools. So before I have them do the introductions, I want to share a little bit of data about this cohort of new leaders. We have 18 new leaders. 61% of them are leaders of color. We know that that's a metric we've been very concerned about, looking at all levels of our teacher force. 88% of these new leaders have previous BPS classroom and/or administrative experience. So we're promoting from within. Even more impressive, I think, is that fully a third of them are BPS graduates. So we're promoting from within our classrooms, starting, from the very beginning. And then the other thing that we're proud of is that this represents a turnover rate of about 13%. The national average in districts like ours of school leader turnover is 27%. So we're managing to hold on to our very talented leaders once we find them. And so with that, I'm going to toss it to my team members. And as the new leaders, as your name is called, if you want to just come up and maybe stand on the ramp behind so we can get the full picture of everyone.
Testing. Okay. Carolyn Alston. This HBCU, Hampton to be exact, grad, and UMass grad, is a Boston native and a BLA and recently Lynch Leadership Academy grad as well. She leads the Roger Clapp Innovation School after having developed her instructional expertise at the Dearborn and serving as an administrator at the Harvard Kent. Welcome, Carolyn.
All right, good evening. I'd like to welcome Kevin Brill to the stage, our interim headmaster at Greater Eggleston. Kevin brings to us a wealth of experience, 23 years at Fenway, 14 of which he was assistant headmaster. But this year he is joining us at Greater Eggleston and helping us to reshape and rethink how we serve our children in the alternative education space. So welcome, Kevin Brill. And I also have the pleasure of introducing Headmaster Dana Brown, one of our newer additions to the staff. He's going to be supporting the high school half of the house at the Dearborn STEM. Kevin also brings a wealth of experience from Malden and other parts of the local Boston area. Kevin is also a 2016 Massachusetts Principal of the Year. So we were able to recruit a really good one over here with some experience to help us lead the way at the Dearborn STEM. So welcome, Dana.
I'm just going to say in advance, this next slide, this is the leader who we added to the deck this afternoon when Richard Cheng pointed out that with his stepping out of his school, there was someone who obviously had to step in. It looks like the deck was transferred at sort of halfway when we were making the slides. So there's oh no, it's all there.
Well, Mary did most of the introduction here. So I'm very, very gratified and very proud to introduce Sarah Chang. Since she was just informed this afternoon that there was this introduction, she couldn't get childcare in place, but she sends her regrets. But nevertheless, very proud to introduce her. No relationship, by the way. Some people have asked, is this a little bit of nepotism here? No, no relationship. But Sarah is definitely a homegrown leader. She's been a teacher leader at the Quincy Upper School for many, many years. And so we're very, very proud to have her serve as my successor at the Quincy Upper.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Derek Ciesla. He is joining us as the principal of the Russell School, and he began his career in Boston at the Perkins. He was an administrator at the Mildred Ave School. He's been a principal in the state of Rhode Island for the past 10 years and has come back to Boston, and I'm thrilled to have him with us.
Lem, now in his 12th year in urban public education, this Morehouse Christian College and Harvard graduate leads the David Ellis School with his expertise as a turnaround teacher at the Blackstone and as an assistant principal in Chelsea, bringing all that to bear at the David Ellis every day. Welcome, Lem Ivy.
All right, Jerlene, John, please come up. Jerlene is serving as our interim headmaster for the West Roxbury Academy, a position she's continuing, I'm here, from last year. She was able to step in and help cover the school last year, so we're super appreciative of you continuing the work. I met her through her work at the English High School about 4 years ago, as well as through her experience as an interim principal at the Philbrick. So brings lots of history and experience to the school, and we welcome you, Jerlene.
I have the pleasure of introducing Darlene Marcano, who is now leading Urban Science Academy. Darlene is one of our BPS grads. She's a 19-year veteran of Boston Public Schools as a teacher and an administrator. She was already providing a very steady hand at Urban Science Academy, and so when it was time to look for a new leader, the community was very clear that she was the only and obvious choice.
Anita Moore. Anita is a lifelong Bostonian. She came through Boston Public Schools herself and has served its families as an educator for more than 30 years. She comes into the principal seat at the Jackson Man after serving as assistant principal for 11 years. Welcome, Anita.
Mr. Daniel Mulvey has been appointed the principal at the Mary Lyon K-8 school on Beechcroft Road, Alston Brighton. He has been previously in alternative ed settings, and the first story he told me was that he felt like he was at home when he was at the Mary Lyon, which he has served there for the last 6 years and is now principal. Welcome, Dan.
And I'd like to introduce Miss Caitlin Murphy, the headmaster of the English High School. She previously worked at the school for 10 years, and she's joining her first year as a principal this year. I was with her. Actually, you saw some of the pictures of her on the screen. Her very first day of school, she had the mayor, the interim superintendent, the president of BTU, the vice president. So no pressure. No pressure, first 10 minutes, so it's going to get easier from here for her. So she's a Dorchester native, and she brought her family in the back. You'll see a whole bunch of cute little Murphys back there. So welcome, Caitlin.
Next, I'm excited to introduce Shelley Olsen. She is going to be the leader of the Dearborn STEM Academy 6 through 8. And Shelley has been at Dearborn for 2 years as the director of math and filled in last year for a time as interim headmaster. Prior to her work in Boston, she was a teacher and a leader in the Chelsea Public Schools, and we are excited about the leadership this former math teacher is going to bring to the Dearborn STEM Academy.
I'm thrilled to introduce Marcia Riddick as the incoming principal of the Mather. Marcia is a Boston native, proud graduate of the O'Brien, and a longtime educator in Boston. She served as an elementary teacher, literacy leader in the district for many years, recently supporting the GRU and its turnaround efforts as the coach there, and then moving on to the Roger Clapp School, where she served as a proud principal for 2 years. So we are thrilled to have her at the Mather.
I am very pleased and proud to present to you the proud principal of the Irving Middle School. This is Miss Jamila Smith. Ms. Smith and I have two things in common right off the bat. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology from Prairie View A&M University, and I have a degree in biology as well. And we both attended the HBCU known as Prairie View A&M, so we're very proud Panthers. So that we have in common and share that love of Texas. Ms. Smith is an internal promotion. She spent quite a bit of time at the Irving, and so we're looking forward to her very strong leadership in improving and moving the Irving forward. So welcome, Ms. Smith.
Yet another BPS grad who is now leading the Roosevelt School, Bennett Steele. She was herself an English learner when she came to Boston Public Schools, and it was that experience that ignited in her a deep commitment to inclusion, which is why she is the absolute perfect candidate to be the new leader of the Roosevelt Full Inclusion School.
I'd like to introduce Ms. Rhiannon Varmette. I think I haven't seen her, but she is our principal at the Boston Early Education Center in East Boston, and she speaks fluent Spanish and was a Lynch Leadership Academy Lynch Fellow at the Hurley School last year, and we're so glad that she is in East Boston.
Ms. Megan Welch is a two-time Athletic Hall of Fame inductee who now leads the Charles Sumner in my new neighborhood in Roslindale, bringing her near 20 years of experience in public education, both in Washington, D.C. and in Boston to bear. She has recently completed the Lynch Leadership Academy Fellowship and is bringing her competitive spirit to the Charles Sumner, ready to win.
Although she's not able to join us tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce Kimberly Williams. Kimberly is another BPS grad, a lifelong Boston resident, who has held a variety of positions within Boston Public Schools, including at one time being the senior officer for the Office of Equity, and also serving as the assistant principal at the Edison K-8 school. And we are very excited that she is now at the helm of the Kilmer School in West Roxbury. So I think you hopefully can all join me in thinking that as we look at this group of August folks gathered on the ramp, that the future of Boston Public Schools is very bright given the leadership that we have.
One more where you guys are standing in front of that. Yeah, just the first row, please. Yeah. Marcia, could you come down? Yeah, stand up. Stand up nice. Perfect. Thank you.
And on that wonderful note of school leadership, that concludes my report. Chairman Lecanto.
Well, thank you, Interim Superintendent Brill, and thank you to Ms. Driscoll this evening for being our Master of Ceremonies. It was great to see all these new leaders back in this room once again. I had the pleasure in August of joining a number of these leaders, if maybe not, maybe all of them, as a matter of fact, at the New Leader Institute. Had a chance to talk a little bit about their efforts and their aspirations for this coming school year. And just such a dedicated group from a diverse background, and you know, we're really impressed, particularly by the fact that a full third of them are graduates of BPS and coming back to serve our system. That's the pipeline that we're working to put in place to build a diverse teacher pool and school leadership pool through our work with City Year and through our work in the Office of Human Capital, and we want to see more of that to come. And so we can't wait to get to work. I know these folks have hit the ground running. Sounds like Ms. Murphy had a very eventful first day, but we'll look forward to hearing more from our school leaders as they continue through the year. I want to note just a couple of items before I move on and ask for my colleagues' input on the superintendent's report. I first want to recognize Miss Evelyn Reyes. She's in the front row in the jeans and the flannel. Miss Reyes, if you stand up. Miss Reyes is going to be joining us at our next meeting as our student representative from the Boston Student Advisory Council. Told people can't hear me, so I'm going to use my teacher voice. Ms. Reyes, we're very excited to have you join us in a few short weeks. And for folks that are interested, Ms. Reyes is a junior at the John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science. I also had the extreme pleasure of joining Ms. Reyes testifying at the State House last year in support of improved state funding for our public schools. And so I've known of you for a while, and I've been very impressed every time I've been in your presence, and we can't wait to have you serving alongside of us. So welcome once again. And the final item, I heard from our executive director at the Madison Park Vocational Technical High School earlier today about a car show and a swap meet that's coming up the weekend after next that's being hosted by the Madison Park Car Club. And for those of you that don't know, Madison Park High School has an automotive program, and it's actually a place where you can take your car to be serviced. And part of the way that the program raises funds and keeps itself self-sufficient is by hosting items like this. So I'm going to tweet this out in a moment, and we'll share this through the Madison Park website, but it's Saturday, September 22nd, 2018, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the Madison Park High School parking lot. It'll be a car show. There's a modest entry fee, and there's also a swap meet. All the entry fees and the swap meet fees are going to be going to the Madison Park Car Club. So with that, I will open it up to my fellow members for comments and questions. And Mr. O'Neill, I believe you had your hand up to note something.
I did. I was just trying to catch it while the school leaders were still here. They're obviously gone. I do want to compliment the interim superintendent and her team on these selections. I see four common themes. One, how this body looks like our student body, and that is different from principals in the past. And I'm really encouraged by that. But also, how many are grads of Boston Public Schools, how many, most importantly, worked in Boston Public Schools, and how many were Lynch Leadership Fellows. And that shows that's a pipeline that has been put in place and a very robust training program. I love when I'm out in schools and meet the Lynch Fellows that are doing their year, working with school leaders and learning the role. And I love that we have this pipeline in place. So I encourage that to grow as much as possible on each of those points. And of course, would love to remind the school leaders who are still here, we were delighted you were here, but every future time you're here, we are going to ask if you have a representative to the Citywide Parents Council from your school, and if you have a representative to SPEDPAC from your parents as well. And if you're a high school leader, do you have a BSAC representative? Because we want BSAC to represent all of our high schools, and we want the Citywide Parents Council and SPEDPAC to represent all of our schools, and we need the school leaders are the ones who make that happen. So we encourage you to know that whenever you're in front of us, as I'm sure our headmaster who is speaking a little bit later tonight knows from past experience, we'll be asking those questions. And I just want to flip for a second to transportation, and thank you, Interim Superintendent Birll, for your comments beforehand. And I recognize that we are in an interesting situation because we are deeply involved in, or you and your team are deeply involved in collective bargaining. Right now, it is very active. There is good faith on all parties involved, and it is very intense. And I won't go any farther than that, but I do want to separate out the issues that are happening each day at our schools, and I really appreciate the time you spent giving those statistics, but also your acknowledgement of how hard this is, not only on our parents and our students, but also on our school leaders and the staff that are standing there. All of us were out visiting schools the first few days of schools, and we're out standing there with the staff who have the list of how many buses they're expected and what are there. And you know, we do actually, I personally saw how much our bus drivers are part of our family. They care about our students as much as our teachers do, and to see them pull up and stop, and yes, it's the first day of school, so they're stopping to explain what students they have on board, and this one's not feeling too well, and this one threw up on the bus. Yes, that happened at one of the buses I was watching. As other buses are aligned behind them, because the bus drivers are part of the family. And so, but we're still having a number of issues, and thank you for acknowledging that even 74% immediately and 94%, 94% within 15 minutes still means 6% are showing up late, and they're missing educational opportunities. They're often missing breakfast, and on the flip side, they're not getting home in time. Now, I know how bad the traffic is in the city. It took me an hour to get here tonight from Charlestown, and including going through police activity, and I showed up late for school committee tonight, as Ms. Robinson did too, because we were stuck in Boston traffic. Parents are very understanding about that, but it's all about communication, communication, communication. And I do want to stress that you have built, I have seen already a great reservoir of goodwill from the school leaders that I have been talking to. They were so impressed by the listening sessions you held over the summer. They were much more impressed by the fact that they saw a change in behavior from people in the bowling building. Phones are being answered quicker, they're getting answers quicker. They were extremely impressed by that. So I encourage you as strongly as possible to be communicating with school leaders, not about the negotiations, so they should know it is active and ongoing and good faith on all parties' part, but about what specifically is going on day by day, what some of the roadblocks are, what your team is doing to change it. I know you're spending time in the transportation center listening to calls with parents. People should know that, but communicate with the school leaders so they can communicate with their individual school communities on a daily basis if possible, until we're at a level that people across the city feel we're in great shape on transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. I also want to echo Mr. O'Neill's points. So I'll begin with transportation as well, since that's what you ended with. I want to acknowledge the good work the district's been doing to make sure that buses are arriving. But I think, I probably suspect you're going to hear not from the 51% of those whose buses were on time, but the 49%. So we may start a hashtag tonight of the 49%, because knowing that all 4 of my kids are either on in the morning or the afternoon, I was able to hear the on-the-ground feedback in real time, and to meet the mother who's leaving the school saying, I watched the bus drive by my stop. So we know that the first day of school, the second day of school, maybe even the third or fourth day of school, there are challenges, but I do want to acknowledge the parents who are working really, really hard to calm the anxiety of themselves, but then also their children, as they are seeing the challenges that their children are facing in the morning. I also want to acknowledge, and as you visit the schools, and I'm happy to see the school leaders, really acknowledging the school staff, the secretaries, the office assistants. Shout out to Ms. Wilkerson from the GRU school, because she's heard from me 3 times already, because we're trying to figure out the afternoon routes and alternate transportation and things of that nature. It's really important that, yes, we applaud school leaders, we applaud staff members behind the scenes, but the front lines, the school secretaries who are getting the names of every bus and getting the numbers and really trying to calm the teachers and the students and assure their school leaders that they're on top of it. So please acknowledge the school secretaries when you're visiting schools and when you're working as parents, when you're working with the school staff, because they're working extra hard. They're working extra hard. So I want to acknowledge them. And then I want to also recognize that behind the scenes we do have these ongoing negotiations, and that is a lot of hard work, but we have some great bus drivers. I've met several of them when I've visited the schools, and I want us to acknowledge some of those good men and women who are doing their best, pulling up. I've seen 3 or 4 buses at one stop, and they're doing their best to figure out which child is coming on which bus. Is that bus going to this school? And they're nodding. So I want to also acknowledge the bus drivers because they have tough jobs. They have tough jobs. So thank you for just the thoroughness of your transportation update. We do look forward to hearing more of those updates in the coming weeks, because we want to hear that the 49% are being heard. We want to hear that the school leaders are feeling as though they're being heard from central office. So that's one thing to note. Second component with the school leaders, and I also want to echo Mr. O'Neill's comments, since they've already left. I am excited to see the leaders who have come in. I want us to think about, especially Dr. Coleman, I want us to think about some of these colleges and grad schools. I saw a number of Harvard Grad School of Education. They have a new dean. We need to connect and find out how we can partner with some of these colleges and grad schools where their graduates are now in our school systems. I saw Harvard Grad School of Education in Leslie a lot in the bios of
NBC.
Yes, as well, NBC. So I think that is something I'm always wanting to think about, the higher ed partnerships that we could have. And when I see graduates from several colleges, we want to think about those partnerships as well. And I would be interested, I know it's something that we were reflecting on, I would be interested to hearing the languages spoken from many of the school leaders because of the diversity in our schools. It is really important, having languages spoken that our students are able and our parents are able to engage with the school leaders. So that would be helpful for us to know. I was typing out the list of the school leaders. It would be great for us to get that feedback as to how well versed are they within the diverse populations that they will be serving. And then my last question I asked this question to you, Interim Superintendent, in our last school committee meeting, of the kind of the listening tour that you had with some of the school leaders. And before, it was a little early on, so you had only had a couple of meetings with school leaders. But now that you've met with them all and then met with them again, in the August Leadership Institute, what has been just something key that has emerged, maybe as a theme from those returning those returning school leaders, but then a theme that maybe you heard of the hope for the new school leaders. So what have you heard from the returning school leaders, and then what have you heard from the new school leaders that is kind of helping you guide your work?
Thank you, Dean Robinson. So interestingly, we did not cut the data in that way, and even in the conversation, there was not a lot of distinguishing between new and seasoned school leaders, so I don't have that, although I can go back through the list of participants and bring that. And in fact, for our next school committee on September 26th, I will be providing a more full report on both the school support model that was emerging and in development, and some of the central office shifts and adjustments, all of which came as a result of the listening session. So I'll be sharing the key themes and highlights then, and I will make sure that we look at that new-old split as well. Or let me rephrase that. Sorry.
Returning.
New and veteran school leaders in our system. Thank you, John Mudd, for tipping me off there. So yeah, I will bring that at the September 26th school meeting.
Okay, I think that would be really great, because we heard and we read in the bios that we have some really experienced leaders, and I love to hear fresh thinking and just new approaches to the way that we can listen, learn, and lead, possibly differently, but then also hearing from the returning leaders, what do they want to see continue, and what do they want to hopefully shift. So that would really be encouraging to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Robinson, and I apologize for referring to you as Ms. Robinson earlier. It's, the rust of being off for a few weeks over the summer. I also want to note as well, thank you for raising the issue of the graduates programs that we work with all around the city. Dean Coleman's no stranger to that, but calling out specifically the new dean at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, Dr. Karen Mapp. She's a veteran of this district. She knows this district well. She knows parent engagement especially well, and so it's a great reminder that you've given all of us to reach out to her and explore new opportunities for us to work together towards a common goal.
Absolutely.
Thank you again. Ms. Oliver Davila, please.
Thank you. You can call me Dr. Oliver.
Yeah.
That is official, but no, you don't have to call me that. I just wanted to say, oh, it's old. It's old. It's old. It's honorary. A long time ago.
Hey, it's a big honor.
It's the best way to get a doctorate. You don't have to do anything. It's awesome. You don't have to study.
That concludes the floor show portion of our evening. Thank you.
I just wanted to, again, welcome Ms. Reyes. I'm really excited that you're going to be sitting next to me, so we'll do a lot of chatting. It's great to have young people as part of our committee. I actually think we should have more than one, but I'm really excited that you're going to be joining us. I also just wanted to, I don't want to repeat everything that everybody said, but I would just say that I appreciate the sharing of information around transportation, and ditto Mr. O'Neill's comments around communicating with school leaders and really urging school leaders to communicate with teachers to communicate with families around all the work that's being done, realizing that we are trying to make sure to get young students, older students on time to school, at the same time realizing some of the challenges we have. So I just appreciate you're really highlighting that and talking about the percentages. And, acknowledging staff, but at the same time, also acknowledging that we have a lot of work to do, so thank you. The last piece that I just wanted to follow up on is it is great to see so many school leaders that are graduates of BPS, and I think probably almost every school committee I've said the same thing around our high school to teacher pipeline. It's great that we have City Year now as a partner, but I really do think that we need to take that program to a whole nother level, and really make sure that our colleges and universities are really helping financially our students over the long term, and that we actually have a place for young people to come back and teach, like a guaranteed teaching position, because that's the only way that we are going to actually have diversity. So I saw diversity in the school leaders, but I would like to ask Ms. Driscoll, or I don't know if you have the information, when we say 61% people of color, I don't know what that means, and so I would like to understand better the breakout. And again, back to Dean Robinson's point about the languages piece, so we do have a diverse district, and we know 42% of our student body is Latino, so I would definitely be interested also in knowing how many Latino school leaders we have out of that 61%.
And we will get that for both, not just the new leaders, but for the entire composition of our school leaders. And
That
so
would be
we will
great. I
bring
mean,
that
I'm
back
sure
to you.
during the year we'll have like human capital conversations. And if I can just say now also for that conversation, that I would like to understand better the turnover. So it's great that we have 13% versus 27%. But what I've heard, over and over is, or have seen statistically also just in research, and I've heard at these school committee meetings that we have a really challenging time retaining Latino teachers and retaining African American and Black teachers. So I would also like to understand better how we're doing in that and what we're doing to increase that, to really retain. And I know we have a couple like the MEOC and the WEOC, but I'd like to also hear just more around our strategies for that retention. And I'm glad that it's lower. I think that's great that it's lower, than nationally. I just would like to know what are the best practices that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver Davila. Dr. Uriarte.
I do wanted to congratulate you for a really good start. I was very happy to see you come in with a smile. And I can't imagine that it has been easy. But I think as we talk to people, there is a sense that you're listening, and that is a really good thing. I think it's important. I think everybody's concerned about the transportation. I'm sorry I missed the executive session, but I'm hoping that we can get to the other side of this as fast as possible, and I think both Mr. O'Neill and Dean Robinson really talked about, and Alex also talked about the importance of communication, and I think particularly with parents, so that parents understand that we are actively engaged with the bus drivers, and that we're actively trying to move it forward, and that and what is going well and what is going badly. I do have to underscore Alex's comment about the language and the diversity of the population. I was, when somebody said this really reflects the makeup of our student body, I had to really sort of look away, because actually it did not. So I think we really need to continue to push so that it does. And because I think it will be, it's to the detriment of a lot of kids, around 40-some% of our kids that don't see a teacher or don't see a leader in their school that looks like them. I think it's important that we recognize that this was a really, good group of people, but we're missing some faces in here that should have been here, and so I'm hoping that we can really gain consciousness of that this is good, but not, this is necessary, but not enough to really meet the challenge that we have in this district at this time with these students.
Yes.
So I just want to put it out there, and I'm going to continue to say it. I know Alex will continue to say it, and we just need to be conscious that it's good, but not enough. So Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Uriarte.
I'm not going to reiterate what's already been said, but I agree wholeheartedly. Particularly, we did make the comment about the diversity issues within the teacher leaders, but just want to congratulate everyone on the hard work that has happened over the summer to get us where we are today, and that people are really thinking critically about what's going on with our bus drivers, what's going on within schools. We don't often celebrate our successes. We've got 30 schools that are getting better lunches. And I think we've got to figure out how we can balance better the good news that's helping students on an everyday basis, but also keeping ourselves to the pushing forward to make sure the things that we all know that still are not where we want them to be, that we're not paying attention to those things. But there's got to be a better balance. And so the smiles that we all saw on children's faces on the first day of school, we want to see those same smiles as the weeks go on, and parents becoming happier as we work forward on the programs, on the problems that we're facing. So thanks to everyone for at least getting us to the starting line, but we know we've got a long way to go.
And I think that's a good segue into talking a little bit more about what we've come together as a group and thought about with regard to the way that we organize ourselves and the meetings that we conduct throughout the year as a committee. And as you know, and as a number of the folks in the audience as well as the committee know, we've dedicated ourselves to increasing the number of retreats that we're taking on a yearly basis. And those retreats are open to the public. Those are held primarily for the purpose of calendar scheduling. We've found that, and I'm noting this for the number of issues that have been highlighted in comments this evening already by Dr. Uriarte, Ms. Oliver Davila, Ms. Robinson. We've taken this step to make sure that these timely issues are issues that we can all take a step back and think about how do we want to plug those in throughout the year, and how do we want to make sure that these issues that are timely and meaningful to our community are being heard by members of the public that have an interest, as well as members of the committee that have a fiduciary duty to oversee this district. So with that, I was going to note it at the end of the meeting, but I'll note it here as well, since we probably won't see as many of you towards the end of the meeting this evening. Next Thursday, which I believe is the 20th, we have a retreat in this building from 5 to 7 p.m. And the agenda will include discussion about the upcoming calendar, a visioning session with Interim Superintendent Brill, and some brief conversation about the superintendent search. Are there any other comments and questions from the membership before we move on?
I just have one. I would be amiss if I didn't congratulate the Early Childhood Department. They've given us all a copy of a new book that was published by the Harvard University Press, Children at the Center, Transforming Early Childhood Education in the Boston Public Schools. Again, I don't think many people realize that the work that the Early Childhood Department has been doing for the last 7 or 8 years under leadership of Jason Sachs is nationally known. We have some of the very best early learning going on in the country. People come from all over the world literally to see the work that's going on here, and it's been capsulated in this book. So please, if you have a chance, take a look at it and congratulate and support, continue to support our early learners.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Mr. O'Neill.
One minor point. I apologize also for not recognizing Ms. Reyes, who will be joining us shortly. Do I pronounce your last name correctly? Right, thank you. I know other members did, but I also wanted to let folks know that Ms. Reyes is going to be participating in a student panel at the Council of Great City Schools on Friday, October 26th in Baltimore, Maryland at the annual conference, and it will be a panel exclusively of students from across the country talking about the power of student voice in the past year and where that movement is going. And Ms. Reyes is going to be the Boston representative, representing 57,000 students on something that will be broadcast live over the internet, et cetera, in front of about 1,000 people. So no pressure. You're going to do fantastic. But we're delighted that you're going to be representing Boston Public School students on a national stage.
Thank you for adding that, Mr. O'Neill. That's appreciated. And again, your reputation precedes you, Ms. Reyes. I did want to just note as well, we've been joined, City Councilor Nissa Sabi-George, our chair of the Council's Committee on Education this evening. Welcome, Councilor. Just to close out the comments, once again, I just want to give a heartfelt thanks to all the hard work from staffers, all the way from custodians to kitchen to staff in the schools, all the way through the bowling building, and especially in the transportation department. I had an opportunity to stop down there earlier this evening and speak to a number of the staff, and just the beehive of activity that's happening in that room every day, trying to make sure that our buses are performing better each day, responding to family and parent and student and school requests. It's much appreciated. It's what makes this school district hum, and we are indebted to their hard work, and we know that it'll continue. So moving on, if there's no further discussion, I'll now entertain a motion to receive the interim superintendent's report as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, Dean Robinson, and thank you, Dr. Coleman. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Is there any objection to approving the interim superintendent's report by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the motion carries. We'll move on now to general public comment. Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Locanto. The public comment period is an opportunity for parents and other concerned parties to make brief presentations to the school committee on pertinent school issues. Questions on specific school matters are not answered at this time, but are referred to the superintendent for later response. Questions on specific policy matters are not answered at this time, but may be the subject of later discussion by the committee. We have 20 speakers this evening, so in accordance with our policy, time will be reduced to 2 minutes per person, and I'll remind you when you have 1 minute remaining, and then 30 seconds. Those who require interpretation services will be allotted an additional 2 minutes. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. Large groups addressing the same topic are encouraged to consolidate their remarks or choose a spokesperson to provide testimony. Written testimony is appreciated and encouraged. Please state your name and affiliation before you begin. TV cameras will only record speakers who face the committee. Our first speaker this evening is Counselor Anita Asabi-George, and she'll be followed by Sasha Cantu and Jill Mcguire.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Locanto, Superintendent Brill, and members of the Boston School Committee. First, I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful new school year. Our kids, our teachers, and school staff here at the bowling, who I know are working tirelessly to make sure that the school year starts right. And selfishly, our parents at home. My triplets have moved this year into the 7th grade and have switched from a 9:30 start school to a 7:20 and 7:45 start school. And a little bit more homework, so we've got some adjusting to do. So I am sneaking out as soon as I'm done here. As the chair, my name's Anita Asabi-George. I'm a Boston City Councilor at large, chair of the Council's Committee on Education, as well as the chair of the Council's Committee on Homelessness, Mental Health, and Recovery. This fall, starting in about 2 weeks, I am hosting a series of town halls across the city of Boston, particular to the topic in the city of Boston on education. And most important for me is to hear from our residents across the city who are interested in the topic of education, in particular the Boston Public Schools. As chair of the Education Committee, as well as a parent and former teacher, I would like to create an opportunity for the community to share, to build, and to engage, and to talk about things that are most important to them. And for me as a parent, schools are one of the most important things for us. These town halls will happen in every neighborhood, kicking off here in Roxbury, just up the street at the Thelma Burns building. They will happen in every neighborhood. We will have a student-only town hall, as well as a teacher-only town hall, and I look forward to those in particular. All topics will be up for discussion. As you know, I have a particular interest in school committee governance, the eventual superintendent search, grade configurations, school safety, transportation, student and family homelessness,
and vocational ed. During these town halls, I hope that they're productive. We finalize the dates and the locations today, so you will all be invited, and I hope that you will participate as you might be inclined to do. Appreciate the moment. Wish you all a good school year as you are charged with leading the school district in partnership with the school department and our school leaders. Excited especially to have met the acquaintance of O'Brien graduates, and I know Ms. Reyes is also an O'Brien graduate. I am a class of 91 from Boston Technical High School. So thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sasha Cantu, and she'll be followed by Jill Mcguire and Lisa Geisbond.
Good evening.
Hello. I'm sorry, excuse me, I have really bad anxiety. I wrote something really quick. My name is Sasha Cantu. I am the mother of 2 past BPS students who were abused and neglected by the staff and students at the Oliver Perry School. I felt that movement was in the interest of my children due to the negative experience partially by BPS. BPS had full knowledge of our traumatic detailed history and current situation. They were involved step by step, and I feared that negligence would happen as it did. There was no loopholes, so there was no space for misunderstandings. I was on top of my children's mental health and special ed plan for many years. Oliver Perry's staff knew I had about 12 professional collaterals involved due to mental health and safety concerns in school and at home. I requested my oldest son be evaluated in school in November 2016, and I did not receive a response till September 2017. My younger son's eval was requested in January 2017, and his eval meeting took place 2 months after. I was pressured and harassed to sign documents I did not feel comfortable signing. I reported school again because of their behavior, and they were upset because I continued to challenge them about education and deadline laws. Soon after I challenged the school staff, I noticed the tones and staff actions towards my children as they became targets. My oldest son was bullied, assaulted by students because of his color and sexual preference. The students' behaviors towards my son and staff not following protocol raised many concerns for collaterals and myself. My younger son was coincidentally considered a troubled child and a threat to staff and students. I became more concerned for my children's school environment because of retaliation became another concern. My son made many reports being abused by students, pushed down the stairs, lockers were slammed on his head, classroom doors slammed behind him, leaving lumps and bruises on my son when he came home. He reported being called many inappropriate names, for example, a snitch, Blackie, Blackie the Black Egg, a fag, a PUS, gay boy, etc. My youngest son reported his homeroom teacher allegedly said only white people celebrate St. Patrick's Day. I requested an explanation and never received one because I was being dramatic. I finally got answers through ICC requesting immediate hearing due to the fact my son was suspended again and again. He was suspended 3 times in a week back to back. He was suspended 2 to 3 times out of assumptions of retaliation. Staff manipulated other children or twisted scenarios not documenting the full facts. I agreed with some suspensions. However, I do not agree with children being suspended due to their disability. I was threatened to have my kids removed and was threatened to have DCF involved by BPS staff. BPS knew I had all kinds of evidence and chose to not listen to me or give us a fair chance at having our concerns investigated. The operation manager, Edward Lee, told me after complaining so much, rather than complain about my staff being neglectful, let's face it, you or dad are no good for this child. I can tell you so many comments that were made to me, and at the end, it really would not matter. Because the way that society is, repeats itself due to bias and racist people. It's just hard for me to keep hope. I mean, look at me. I'm a young minority Latin mom with some credits in college for criminal justice who suffers from chronic PTSD, going against a union of educators represented by the system that has let us down for many years. A system that has proven to the people that is not so reliable when it comes to their children's education and safety.
Ms. Cantu, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the superintendent will have somebody follow up with you afterwards. I'm ready
Ms.
to continue
Cantu,
our public
if I may suggest, I understand, and thank you, by the way, for being brave enough to come up here and share your story with us. I notice you're reading from something. If you would be so kind as to provide us with your written testimony, we'll make sure that everybody on the committee receives a copy of it. And I'll ask Chief of Staff Rob Consalvo to meet you in the back of the room to speak about your issues in further detail.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Mr. Consalvo, our Chief of Staff, he'll meet you in the back of the room to speak about your concerns and hear your concerns in further detail.
He knew about my concerns, and
Okay.
he said he was gonna take care of it, and here we are a year after. And when I reported it to the education and elementary people, and they reported this to the BPS denied all allegations after I have proof.
Ms.
Emails,
Cantu.
text messages.
Ms. Cantu, if I may, I appreciate your concerns. I will ask Mr. Consalvo to speak with you or any number of the other staff here that are with us from district central staff this evening to hear about your concerns. And we will follow up as appropriate. We've heard you tonight. We can't respond to any sort of concerns that a public speaker brings to us as part of the meeting, but we will certainly follow up as appropriate.
And Ms. Cantu, Dr. Charles Granson will join Mr. Consalvo in speaking with you in the back. That's Dr. Granson there. Thank you, and thank you for
Thank you, Ms.
sharing your
Pearl.
story.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jill Mcguire, and she'll be followed by Lisa Geisbond and Janet Fillion.
Good evening. My name is Jill Mcguire, and I am a parent who believes in public education. My husband is a teacher at Latin Academy. My son is now a 7th grader at Latin Academy, which should be interesting for both of them this year.
Yeah.
And my daughter is a 5th grader at the Haley Pilot School. I believe in the BPS because I believe in the heroic work that is done in our individual school communities every day, despite horrible conditions and things that they cannot control. But it becomes harder and harder to place my trust in an institution that time and time again violates that trust. While figuring out how my son would get to Latin Academy this year, neither BPS Transportation nor the MBTA could provide me with a list of his options to get to school. I figured that out on my own with help from friends on Facebook. The door-to-door bus for my son that we're in the process of trying to cancel, but that is on record at the moment, never showed up day 1 and showed up at 7:50 on day 2, and he's required to be in his seat at 7:20. Plan in place, we sent him off on his first trip by himself on the MBTA with a bunch of other students. The Latin Academy students on the 36 bus that goes from Forest Hills to Latin Academy Express dropped the children off at Forest Hills with no explanation and no instructions on how they were supposed to get to school. Neither BPS Transportation nor the MBTA could tell me why the students were dropped there. I found out from Facebook that there had been an accident at Forest Hills necessitating a change. That's understandable. What's not understandable is that the MBTA employee my son went to for assistance responded with, "What do you want me to do about it?" He's 12. Back to the summer of 2007, you assigned the book Dear Bully to rising 7th graders. It is filled with vulgarities and inappropriate content. I will spare you that content, but it's page 10 is the beginning in this book. I'll leave it for you. I spoke with the head of the committee that assigns the book, and she told me they were aware of it, but felt it was appropriate content. That book's now been assigned to rising 7th graders. And if you didn't follow that, that means the same children have now been assigned the book twice. The start time issue. You said you'd minimize the impact to children with disabilities, yet you changed the start time of almost every single one of the schools that serves those children. There was no SPED representative at the West Roxbury parent meeting, and no one noticed until I mentioned it. Every question asked by parents was 100% predictable, and you had no answers. And I do not consider we're working on an answer. For years, you've allowed our schools to be underfunded. You've accepted the status quo, despite the fact that you know you cannot deliver a Neiman Marcus education on a filings basement budget.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire.
Our next speaker is Lisa Geisbond, and she'll be followed by Janet Fillion and Ann Savoreed.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lisa Geisbond. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens for Public Schools and the wife of a BPS graduate. CPS has been advocating for a well-resourced, high-quality, democratically accountable public schools for all Massachusetts students for more than 30 years. We joined with other organizations calling for a permanent superintendent search process that results in the most highly qualified educational leader possible. This is an extremely consequential decision that will affect not only 50,000 diverse BPS students and their families, but the broader community and residents of Greater Boston. We support the letter's 3 demands. 1, that the interim should not be considered for a permanent appointment. 2, there should be a timeline for the search so a new superintendent is in place at least by the 2019-2020 school year. And there should be a plan for a transparent process with authentic community engagement. The first demand is particularly important as it supports the goal of attracting a quality, diverse, and experienced pool of applicants. We know it is not unusual to hire interim school leaders who are barred from consideration for the permanent position for precisely that and other good reasons. Interim superintendents have a specific role to come in for a finite period of time to handle the transition, let all the stakeholders take a breath, and give them a chance to figure out exactly what they will need next. The person must be highly competent and able to work without stress or concern that every step they take will be viewed as an audition to become the permanent superintendent. We also know that at a prior meeting, school committee member Miran Uriarte had put forward the names of candidates of color who wanted the job, but was told that those candidates of color would not be put forward now, that there would not be a permanent possibility for the person who took this position. Again, in the interest of finding the most highly qualified, experienced candidate who reflects and represents the diversity of the students and families in BPS, we strongly support the demands of the joint letter. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Geisbond.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Janet Fillion, and she'll be followed by Ann Savoreed and Jane Miller.
My name is Janet Fillion, and I've been teaching Latin at Boston Latin Academy for 49 years now. I have been the advisor to the Boston BLA Classics Club for 24 years. The Classics Club is a member of the state organization called the Massachusetts Junior Classic League and also of the National Junior Classical League. The Classics Club is BLA's largest club, between 150 and 200 members every year. We don't have meetings, but we have outings. 4 times throughout the year, we take long bus trips or flights to our destination. The Berkshires for the Catapult Contest, New York City for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Cape for our annual state convention, and then we fly every year to some different state university for our national convention, which takes a week. Transportation is the main expense for our club. It's really 99% of what we spend our money on. I try to pay part of one bus trip every year by using Donors Choose, but that's just a drop in the bucket. For instance, the bus to New York City costs $2,500. The flights per person are about $600. For this reason, our club has a history of serious fundraising. We do this mostly now in September in the hopes of raising the funds we will need for a full year's worth of transportation. So, for instance, if a bus costs $2,500, instead of charging $50 per kid, because that's what it would be, I charge $10 per kid and try to get the other $40 some other through fundraising. In addition, if a student does a really good job of fundraising and maybe raises $200 for the club by selling maybe $600 worth of items, I promise them that if they go to the state or the national convention, that the money that they raise for the club isn't for the club, it's for them. It pays their registration. So it's a really good deal for the kids.
20 seconds.
Every year I have 1, 2, or 3 kids going to state convention, which costs about $200 free because of their fundraising. In addition, I try to give a subsidy to any student going to the national convention in order to lessen the fees for that. And like last June, I was able to give $200 to the 8 people who went to the national convention. So I'm talking, in case you don't know, about the students' activities funding. What is the problem with this new system of checks? Well, last June, I tried to pay a small bill, $102, to a bus company. I gave the invoice and then was given the 3rd degree by the downtown treasury people. What was this for? Where's the invoice? And of course, I had already given the invoice. Twice, my school secretary had to call me in to ask me further questions about this charge, $102.
Ms. Fillion.
This money was the club's money, not the city's. It took over a month to get that check. Furthermore, it is my understanding that no check will be written by the city until after the service is performed. Well, that's not how bus companies or airlines work. They want their payment before you ride, not after.
Ms. Fillion.
Ms. Fillion, I'm
Are
sorry.
you telling me that's it?
Yes.
Yes. Could we have a copy of your comments? In
Yes, I
writing?
do. I have 3 or 4 copies.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker
And
is
Ms. Gillian, I'll be happy to have Eleanor Lawrence. I don't think she's in the room right now, but we'll be happy to have someone follow up with you. We know there are lots of questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ann Savory. She'll be followed by Jane Miller and Erin Birmingham.
Good evening, all. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard tonight. My name is Ann Savrid, and I've been a parent volunteer at Boston Latin Academy for 12 years now. You can see a theme here. And I've also, for the past 4 years, had the opportunity to work with the treasurer as a volunteer mostly, working on the payments processing and bookkeeping, including student activity funds. The reason I'm here tonight is to ask you to take a very close look at the new student activity funds policy, which will soon be presented to your committee for approval. In my opinion, the proposed policy does not conform to Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 47, as amended by Chapter 66 of the Acts of 1996. I won't say that again. And should not be approved by the Boston School Committee until it's revised to reflect the original intent of that law. MGL 7147 states, quote, the school committee may authorize the municipal or regional school district treasurer to establish a checking account, hereinafter referred to as the student activity checking account, to be operated and controlled by a school principal, and from which funds may be expended exclusively for student activity purposes. Section 4 of the proposed BPS policy states that it, quote, authorizes school leaders to request authorized disbursements for recognized student activity organizations, meaning that these payments will be processed through the city's base financial system. The system which is already in place is a cumbersome and drawn-out process which can take as much as a month to complete. When the Student Activity Fund training materials were presented to principals and headmasters in the summer of 2007, the process for dispersing student activity funds was laid out, saying that each school's student activity checking account was required to be with Citizens Bank, must utilize the city's tax ID, and that no other funds could be held in that account. In the months since, however, the procedure has morphed into a requirement that all student activity fund payments be processed through BASE, which is an unnecessary and cumbersome and complex process. This lengthy process may actually have a chilling effect on students and teachers who are engaged in planning and managing student activities. They may feel that it's just not worth it to go to all this trouble. And as a result, students may miss out on valuable extracurricular opportunities. I also feel that it may lead to people working around the system, and we may actually lose control over the process that is intended. So I hope you'll take these concerns into account as you review the proposed BPS policy, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jane Miller, and she'll be followed by Erin Birmingham and Shalina Semexent.
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Jane Miller. I'm a graduate of BPS, the parent of 3 Boston Public School students, a teacher, and the co-founder of Start Smart BPS. I'm here today to join other groups in a recent statement regarding the superintendent search. We are at a pivotal time in BPS, currently assessing grade configurations, rolling out Build BPS, the Opportunity Index, reviewing our current school enrollment plan. And because of this, I stand behind the joint statement asking for a more transparent, engaging process in the search for a superintendent. If you do not publicly state that Superintendent Birll is not eligible to apply for the role of permanent superintendent, strong candidates may be discouraged from applying for the role under the assumption that she has a preference. Our pool may lack the quality, experience, and diversity that we seek. And because of this, I ask that she publicly state she will not apply for the job. It has now been almost 3 months since Superintendent Chang has resigned. No timeline has yet been provided on the search for a new superintendent. Given the number of initiatives I previously referred to, it's imperative that we have a permanent superintendent in place to engage with our communities and move BPS forward. Ms. Birll herself has noted that the school system will have to make some hard choices and that these will require multi-year decisions. It seems a fair request then that we have one leader to lead us through these hard choices she referred to, rather than changing the reins halfway through once again. It's vital that we hire a new superintendent by the start of next school year who can begin to tackle the hard multi-year choices that need to be made, whilst also offering us consistency and stability.
20 seconds.
Currently, every BPS decision seems shrouded in mystery, with limited explanation to community members. Information about the algorithm around the start times or details about the Build BPS plan are seemingly as difficult to find as the Holy Grail. Therefore, in order for a new superintendent to hit the ground running, make the difficult decisions referred to by the current Superintendent Birll, and rebuild the trust that's been eroded in the past few years, it is essential that students, parents, teachers, and community leaders are given a true place at the table for the hiring of the next superintendent. Therefore, I and Start Smart BPS stand behind the joint statement submitted tonight.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Erin Birmingham, and she'll be followed by Shalina Semexon. Thank you. And Elizabeth Kirkland.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Erin Birmingham Anadu. I am a Boston resident, a broker, and an attorney. I'm also a BPS parent, co-founder of Start Smart BPS. I stand behind the statement that Jane Miller just provided to the school committee. We are proud to be working united with civil rights groups and other parent organizations to address the ongoing issues within the Boston public school systems, not limited to the superintendent search. I also stand behind the statements of Chairman O'Neill requesting direct communication with school leaders relating to the transportation issues. I further ask for direct communication with parents. I will say it's not fair to blame the bus drivers for all of the issues that are happening right now with transportation. Siblings going to the same school yet being assigned to different buses is not the fault of a bus driver. Bus drivers are not being properly trained and educated on bus routes, being left to ask parents, how do I get to the school? That's not the fault of the bus driver, so it's unfair to pin that on them. I further would just, after reviewing the documents that have been left out, I reviewed the document of the official minutes of the school committee executive session, December 14th, relating to a meeting that was held at 10:35 p.m., and I questioned the assertion of attorney-client privilege under your summary of the discussion. I do not see an attorney listed in attendance, so I question if it is work privilege, then a log should be attached, or it should be specifically stated as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shalina Semexon, and she'll be followed by Elizabeth Kirkland and Nicole Williams.
Good evening.
My name is Shalina Semexon, and I'm the parent of 3 children, a 7-year-old in the 2nd grade, a 9-year-old in the 4th grade, and an 11-year-old in the 6th grade. All 3 attend KIPP Boston Academy in Mattapan. I am here on behalf of my KIPP families who are unable to attend, and also myself, because many of them are still waiting for buses. So a few of my parents who were supposed to be here to testify are unable to be here, because by the time their kids get off the bus, they got to get them home. So it's already late. Since this KIPP school has moved to Mattapan, the parents and I have had to endure the hassle of being notified days prior to school start when we're going to get our buses. So parents are shuffling around trying to figure out, wait, how do I figure out dropping and picking up my kids? So we have a limited amount of time. Not only that, KIPP starts school 3 weeks before BPS school starts. So we're already in session. Parents are not assigned school buses, so we have parents who have not been assigned yet. So many of our parents are still struggling, trying to figure out how to get their kids to school. When the parents are calling transportation, they're being placed on hold. When they're sending emails, KIPP has been forwarding many of our parents to contact transportation, and our parents are very dissatisfied because they're not sure what to do. They're contacting transportation, but we are aware of the limited people who are here, and we are aware of that, but at the same time, our kids are not getting the transportation they need. Our school starts at 7:30, and many of our buses are getting there late. I have dropped off my kids, and I stood there, and for an hour, I'm watching buses arrive. By 8:30, school buses are still arriving. I've even watched buses show up with no kids on the bus, and those are red flags. No bus driver should be showing up to a school with no kids on the bus.
20 seconds.
Our families are being affected. It starts at the school, no buses are showing up. Because the buses are not showing up, kids are getting to school late. They're missing the first part of their education. Our kids are from the city, that should not be happening. One of the parents that were supposed to be here today, her son gets door to door. For the last 7 days, she's had to drop her son to school. His bus has not arrived. It's not fair to her that her son has an accommodation and he's not receiving it. I wish she was here tonight to share her story. Not only that, in the evening, her bus gets here after 6 o'clock. He has to take a medication by 6. This is the ripple effect of what's happening with transportation that's affecting our families.
Ms. Mixon, thank
I
you.
understand that you guys reported 51% of our families, the buses got there on time. What about the 49% of us whose kids are not getting here on time? My kids have to endure getting home extra late off the bus, and by the time they get off the bus, the transition to get them something to eat, the transition to get their homeworks done, before you know it, it's time for bed. So there are a limited amount of time for them to participate in any activities they would have to in the community. I believe a lot of parents would be here tonight sharing their stories if the buses showed up on time.
Thank you, Ms. Maxon. And I'll note that our Chief Operating Officer and our Director of Transportation will be happy to speak with you in the back of the room to learn more about the issues at your school.
Ms. Delaverne, Stanislaus, and John Hanlon will speak with you in the back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Elizabeth Kirkland, followed by, okay, thank you. And our next speaker will be Nicole Williams, followed by Linda McRae and Peggy Wiesenberg.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Nicole Williams. My child currently attends second grade at KIPP Academy. My issue is that currently, for the past 3 years, he's been on the bus. My issue is transportation. Last year, the bus was late. Also, transportation put him off on Columbia Road, like down there where KFC is. At that time, he was young. He didn't know where to go or what to do. Another parent was taking their child off the bus, and they was like, where's this child supposed to go? And the child said, well, he's in my class. So that parent was able, good thing he knew my number, he was able to call me and said, well, I have your child here waiting with me, and I'll wait for you to get here to get him. That was a busy intersection, 2 people where there was an incident, and that street was blocked off due to violence in that area. Not only that, the transportation last year had us walking more than a mile from my house to take a bus. We wait about an hour, for the bus. Not only that, we should be getting the buses to and from school on time. We need more monitors, like good monitors on the buses, same for our students that have disabilities. By the time that the kids get home, as one of the other parents said, the kids, they're young due to the, they have to use the bathroom, they have to eat, we have to do homework because they have to get on the bus by 6:45 every morning. Children are on the buses jumping up and down. My grandson has told me that other kids from the other buses, because there's no monitor, they're throwing stuff at the buses. We need crossing guards where we get our buses, Quincy and Magnolia Street. It's a very, very busy intersection in the morning, about 6 o'clock. There's about like 5, 6 other charter schools at that stop. Not only that, when it's 100 degrees outside, there's no air on the buses for the kids. So they're sitting there in traffic. It's 100 degrees outside.
Ms. Williams?
Also, when calling, trying to get through to transportation, they refer us to call you guys for answers, and the phone, it just rings and rings, or you're on hold, or if you're even trying to even track the buses, that's impossible.
Ms. Williams? Thank you for your comments. Could I get a copy of that, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Our next speaker is Linda McRae, and she'll be followed by Peggy Wiesenberg and Reverend Willie Broderick.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm just going to speak from the heart, okay? My son is in 2nd grade at Kipp Academy, and I am very disturbed that there are no bus monitors on the bus. I've been in traffic, driving in traffic, seeing kids just fight, aggression. We're not living no longer as Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Creature Double Feature. All that is gone. This is 2018, okay? I believe some of the kids are being terrorized on the bus, and I'm here to ask, where are the bus monitors? Is it funding in Massachusetts? I'm outraged. I want to do something about it. I plan to volunteer as a bus monitor, and I implore everybody to fill out a query check for all of those who are concerned. If you can, fill out a query check and pass the query, then volunteer to become a bus monitor. I plan to. That's how outraged I am. It hurts me to see some of the stuff that I see. I go to bed at night like, wow, they're being terrorized September through June. Does anybody care? I feel like filming it sometimes, or stopping at the bus stop or whatever. Bus drivers, they just keep on driving while they have a WWE scene in the back. And it's hurtful. Another thing, I had a convenient stop for pickup. Now all of a sudden it's 5 blocks away, which is unnecessary because the bus drives by the destination. I mean, the pickup from the old pickup stop. So I fill out the form online.
Ms. McRae?
Nothing changed. He's walking 5 blocks in the snow and the ice and all of that didn't even hit yet.
Ms. McRae?
And we live in a neighborhood where back in the day, everybody shoveled the sidewalk. And they used to sand it, and it looked like a beach.
Ms. McRae?
Now the kids, that's it?
I'm afraid you're past your time. Thank you.
Well, can I talk to somebody about changing the bus stop?
Yes, right in back here in the green dress, another member of our team is ready to speak with you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And thank you for your willingness to volunteer as well, right over there.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Peggy Wiesenberg. She'll be followed by Reverend Willie Broderick and Mary Battenfeld.
Good evening, Ms. Wiesenberg.
Thank you,
And
Chair.
welcome back. I hope you had a lovely summer.
I had a great summer. Thank you.
This is coming off your 2 minutes,
Particularly
you know.
of the break in meetings. As a parent of 3 BPS grads, I stand with the community and civil rights groups who you'll be hearing from through Reverend Broderick regarding the superintendent's search. Demand 1 is aimed at the mayor, and for time, I just ditto the comments of Citizens for Public Schools and Start Smart. But since I was abroad and was getting multiple texts at midnight, I can say that, speaking for myself, the abrupt departure of Superintendent Chang, which the media reported June 22, was negotiated by the mayor. The mayor selected Laura Perrell as interim before this committee met, and apparently without the committee being asked for names of possible candidates for interim. The minutes of your executive session, June 27th, now public, revealed that the chair said that, quote, he and Mayor Walsh recommend for the position Laura Perrell and recommend scheduling a school committee meeting Monday, July 2nd, at which time the committee would vote to offer the position of interim to Ms. Perrell, unquote. State law, the school committee is responsible for appointing personnel to the following positions: superintendent. In addition, the school committee may establish the positions of and appoint assistant and associate superintendents.
20 seconds.
You are the hiring authority, not the mayor who appointed you. You need to announce a timetable and authentically engage the community. You also, I would suggest, humbly, need a policy for succession in case something unplanned happens to a superintendent. DESE Commissioner Mitchell-Chester died on a Monday evening after a short illness, much as a shock to many of us. The Board of Elementary and Secondary Education voted the next day, June 27th, to appoint Deputy Commissioner Jeff Wilson as acting. Missouri Board of Education on December 1st of 2017 removed the Commissioner of Education, citing a need to move in a new direction in public education, and they voted to appoint a deputy, then deputy commissioner as interim.
Thank you, Ms.
effective
Wiesenberg.
immediately.
Ms. Wiesenberg, thank you.
Okay.
If you have additional comments,
this
you can
is-
submit them in writing or by
Yes,
email.
I will
Thank you.
also submit an article on the case for an open superintendent by Terry Davis for your reading. This is how democracy works. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Reverend Willie Broderick, followed by Mary Battenfeld and Jolanda Ingram.
Good evening.
Good evening, Reverend.
Chairperson Lecanto, to Interim Superintendent Perrell. My name is Reverend Willie Broderick II. I serve as chairperson of the Boston Network for Black Student Achievement. However, today I come representing 11 organizations with our concerns about having a successful search for the next Boston Public School Superintendent. I will first start with mentioning each of these organizations that have come together collaboratively for this statement. I think that is important to list and name each of those groups who work very hard on this statement, and then I'll commence with the statement. The signatories are BEAM, the Black Educators Alliance of Massachusetts, the Boston branch of the NAACP, the Boston Network for Black Student Achievement, Citizens for Public Schools, the East Boston Schools Family Coalition, the Harbor Point Community Task Force, MassCosh, the Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health, Quest, the Quality Education for Every Student, Surge, Showing Up for Racial Justice Boston, Start Smart Boston, and Union for Minority Neighborhoods. And the statement is as such. The selection for the new superintendent of schools for Boston will affect the lives, as you've already heard, of more than 57,000 students and their families in every neighborhood of this city. At this time of this stark inequality and access of opportunity, as we deal with the opportunity and achievement gap across this district, and we deal with the extremely impactful decisions regarding our future of schools and as it relates to facilities, we think right now is a very critical juncture, particularly for the choosing of our next superintendent. To that end, it is imperative that the process is one that will generate the most highly qualified educational leader, and that process is an inclusive and transparent one. As organizations are committed to the success of every student in every school, we have come together to declare that the following actions are mandatory for a successful search. First, that the school committee and the mayor must state publicly that the interim superintendent will not be considered for a permanent appointment. Our goal and expectation is that quality, diverse, and experienced pool of candidates will apply. Without a definite statement regarding the interim superintendent, however, strong candidates may conclude that this search is not a serious one, and they will decline to or be reluctant to apply. We also ask that the school committee must approve a firm timeline for the search, and that the superintendent must be in place as soon as possible, but certainly within time for the 2019 and 2020 school year. Delays in the search process will potentially hinder the likelihood of drawing highly qualified candidates and could delay a permanent hire of the superintendent for another full academic year. This will be a detriment to the city's students and to our schools and to our families and parents. Last, as I understand that the time is up, that the school committee must quickly develop a plan for a transparent search process with authentic community engagement. This, to us, is very critical for the next school superintendent, and we hope that this will not be a decision that is made behind closed doors. All stages of this process we request and ask, including the decision-making, must include a diverse body of students, teachers, parents, educators, and community members. These voices must not be silenced in favor of private foundations and business interests. This is not rhetoric, this is reality, and we ask that the school committee take these requests into their consideration, and that we hope that these requests at the next meeting on September 26th will be answered and responded to. We will provide further requests regarding the composition of this search committee in the future. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you, Reverend. Our next speaker is Mary Battenfeld. She'll be followed by Jolanda Ingram and Julia Mejia.
Good evening. My name is Mary Battenfeld, and I'm speaking tonight as a BPS parent and member of Quality Education for Every Student to affirm the statement just read by Reverend Bodrick and underscored by other speakers on the selection of the new superintendent. Quest participated actively in the process that resulted in former Superintendent Chang's selection. That experience, as well as more generally the perspective we bring as parents, leads us to believe that it is critical that the interim superintendent not be considered for the permanent position, that the timeline reflect the urgent need to get a permanent leader in place, and that the search process be fully transparent and authentically engage families, students, as well as parents and community groups. Finding a superintendent who reflects the diversity of BPS students and families, who listens to and genuinely engages families in the community, and is able to turn hopes and visions for equity and opportunity into institutional reality is a difficult but not impossible task. But that possibility requires the conditions articulated in the statement Reverend Broderick just read. You will not find candidates reflective of our district's diverse students with the training and experience to meaningfully confront opportunity and achievement gaps and the institutional racism that creates them if you effectively bar the door to applicants of color via a candidate who is already inside the door. You will not find a candidate who earns the trust and buy-in of families by deliberating behind closed doors or with a pseudo process that pretends to listen to parents while actually giving more weight to the opinion of the mayor's office and business and nonprofit leaders. Above all, you will not end up with a superintendent who effectively develops and advocates for policies and budgets that meet all our children's needs unless parent and community voices are at the center of the decision maker. I hope we can all agree that the process through which the interim superintendent was selected did not reflect the best we can do. To quote Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, no one else was in the room where it happened. We can do better, and that should start with the school committee responding immediately to the points in the statement from 11 community and civil rights organizations and beginning work on a genuine, timely, and fully transparent search process. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jolanda Ingram, followed by Julia Mejia and Isabel Torres.
Thank you for taking this role.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm sorry. I'm just on a time schedule, you guys. I'm sorry. I respect everyone in their position. Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for taking this role, Laura. I really appreciate it. I know you're in a difficult position. Someone once told me a great leader is one that listens to candid conversations and good conversations. I feel like your office didn't do that. I feel like I shouldn't have had to go to Channel 5 just to express my concern about my 6-year-old, one of 7 BPS children that was left at a bus stop for an hour and a half, or whose bus didn't show up the entire week. Following the second week, didn't show up but an hour and a half. Now that I've been broke down many barriers by going on Channel 5, the situation got fixed. Thank you. I would like to see more diversity and inclusion in the BPS principals. Echo what Dean Robinson said. I ask that you please take your time to go out to Cambridge College, UMass Boston, get to know these recent grad. I'm a Cambridge College grad. I just got a promotion at Faulkner Hospital. I am doing very well. They were impressed about my knowledge and how much I knew about Joint Commission and the CMS and survey. Transportation. Why is the union in place? How do we as parents vote trans dev out? How do we put transportation drivers back in the hands of the school system where they're hired directly from the school? Let's cut the third man. Is it hard to change your policy? Why is it hard? I feel like changing your policy is like committing murder. Once someone gets a murder sentence, it's hard to change anything. Let's get rid of the politics. All we're asking as parents, if you listen to us, when you get up in the morning, think about my children. Think about my son, my 6-year-old, being left. And you get a call at Faulkner Hospital. You're on 90 days grace period because you just got a promotion. You can't get off. Think about my son that's stuck there, and I had to leave him with a complete stranger. I didn't know that woman. I had to leave him. She could have raped my son, anything. I had to leave him with her, and she drove him to the school for me. So I thank her for being a good constituent of Boston. What is the budget? Let's look at the budget. I've called Beverly, I've called Lexington, I've done some research for you guys. I can share the best practice. Now I'm gonna leave it in your hands. I am requesting a meeting. I can get some parents together. We're not gonna jump on you, we're not gonna yell at you. We just want a positive conversation. I'm just gonna shout people out. Mr. Dorsey, we need you. Ron Dorsey, we need you. Please help me. Shonda, I need Shonda in that meeting. I need Miss Delaverne in that meeting. I need Mayor Walsh definitely in the meeting because he's over this district. I need you guys all in a meeting with us, and you tell us the number of parents we could bring, and let's share best practice. I've done a lot of research. I'm a college grad. I'm very smart. I'm very educated. I have answers, and as a parent, just hold a form. Listen to us. Hold a form. I can share what I found. Beverly, Lexington, this does not happen. My situation happens. It's going on my 5th year this situation has happened. My IEP students get left at the door, and he gets door to door because Trans Deb didn't download the or it's not on the bus driver's DBR. It's a term that they use if you don't know. I've been inside I've already got my inside scoop. I did this research on my own. How does your operation work? I already know. But let us meet with you to try to share best practice on what I found out. Maybe that can help our district, what Beverly's doing, what Lawrence is doing, what the MECO students, MECO bus drivers are doing. They don't have a third party, I'm gonna tell you that. So how do we vote them out? Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Oh, can you let me know when that meeting can happen?
Thank you, Ms. Ankrum, and I'll have Dallas Stanislaus follow up with you initially.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Julia Mejia. She'll be followed by Isabel Torres and Ivelisse Carabello.
We won't be followed by those names that you just mentioned because many of us have to go back home and take care of our kids because we don't have, many of us are single moms. So Ivelisse and I think Isabel have already left. so whoever else can speak. So my name is Julia Mejia. Thank you so much for blessing me with your presence tonight. I am a Boston Public School graduate. I am considered a hybrid parent. I have kids in different spaces, and so for me this conversation is very personal and professional. I want to just basically make a few points in regards to representation or lack thereof. It was really great to see the effort that was made. But as a parent who's Latina, and not to see one single person who can connect with my children there leading in positions like this was disheartening. And I think that BPS really needs to step up the game when it talks about representation and making sure that representation does not overlook the fact that Latinos are also part of that, considering that we are 42% of those that you serve, right? So I would like to just kind of put that out there that we need to do better in that case. The other incident that I want to address is I run C-Plan, which is the Collaborative Parent Leadership Action Network, and over the last few weeks, I have yielded a lot of calls from parents regarding the bus issues, but what I found to be most troubling were calls from parents who did not speak English, who did not know how to navigate the system, and did not know how to find out where their children were. More alarming, I also spoke to parents who were undocumented and who were afraid to even make a phone call. And imagine being a parent waiting at the bus stop for your child to arrive and they're not there, knowing the issue that we have with ICE. So I think that BPS, while we applaud a lot of the efforts that you've made, I think that we need to do a better job at making sure that parents who don't speak English and those who are undocumented understand what this is, so they're not forced to wait and pray that their children were not, snatched up. So the other thing that I want to point out, and I left my notes over there because, I was so excited to be here, is that I think that as we continue to think about the next superintendent, I am going to really be on top of this situation because we need to really think about diversity, and we need to make sure that those who are most impacted and who have lived experience are the ones who are leading this district, because you have to come from a place of understanding the realities of those that you're supposed to serve, not just because you're a parent of BPS. Okay, that's great, but we need to do better, and we need to make sure that it's representative. So if we have 42% of students, I would really hope and pray that we do all that we can to ensure that at least there's a few Latino candidates in that pool to choose from. And I hear the little buzzer, and I know Elizabeth's going to tell me to shut the mic down, and that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mejia.
Thank you, Ms. Mejia.
Mr. Lecanto, that concludes our speakers for general public comment.
All right, well, thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Our first and only action item this evening is grants for approval totaling $72,125,049. I will open it up now to questions and discussion from the committee. Any questions on grants for discussion? Well, if there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the grants as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Sounds like a second from Ms. Oliver Dowla, a very anticipatory second. Is there any discussion or objection? Is there any objection to approving the grants by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the grants are approved. All right, we'll move on now to our first report, a memorandum of understanding between the Boston Public School System and the Edward M. Kennedy Academy for Health Careers. At this time, I'd like to invite the EMK headmaster, Dr. Karen Walker Gregory, to please step forward with her presentation. But first, I'll turn it over to the interim superintendent for her opening comments.
Thank you, Chair Lecanto, and thank you, Dr. Walker Gregory, for joining us tonight. As you know, Dr. Walker Gregory is the headmaster of the Edward M. Kennedy Academy for Health Careers. She will make a presentation tonight on renewing the district's Memorandum of Understanding with the school, which operates as a Horace Mann charter. This renewal is required every 5 years. The school is doing some amazing work, as you'll hear a bit about. They have tremendous partnerships with area colleges and universities, local businesses and corporations, and the school continues to boast a high graduation rate, so we are looking forward to this evening's presentation. Thank you, Dr. Walker Gregory.
Thank you.
Good evening, Doctor.
Yes. Good evening, Chairman Lecanto, Superintendent Birll, and members of the Boston School Committee. I just do want to say that this has been a listening tour in itself, being here, and whatever I can do to help and support, please with 29 years in the district and 18 years at EMK. Please use me as a resource, but just wanted to let you know I'm here to help. I just also want to just thank Mr. Locanto for joining us at graduation. I want to also especially thank Mr. Rob Consalvo and Donna Muncy and Karen Castaneda for their support in this whole process, and then just giving me the opportunity to talk about the mission of EMK. As you know, we're a college preparatory high school that is focusing on the vocational, not only college, but vocational high school and health assisting. We continue to make sure all our students are college ready. In terms of just a history of our school, we were originally a pilot school and then went into a Horace Mann charter school, and had a 5-year charter renewal in 2008, 13, and 17. And thanks to Mayor Menino, we were able to rename our school in honor of the late Senator Edward Kennedy. Our enrollment continues to grow. We have a second site, and in 2016 we had the first Chapter 74 program with health assisting. We continue to have some great success around graduation in college. 98% of the graduation rate, dropout rate continues to be low. And of course, a lot of our students, about 56% at this point, are majoring in the health professions. We continue to have a long wait list. And over this year alone, we had 1,000 applications for 100 ninth grade seats. Equity is still a major priority for our school. We continue to grow in the ELL population and IEP population from 2011 to 2018 with an increase over the years. So just, just to highlight that our job is to educate every student that walks in this building. So no matter where you come from, how you got there. We continue to be a level 2 school at this point. I know levels are going to be changing, but we continue to educate our kids and be successful with MCAS and proficiency rates. We have tons of partnerships, but I've just named a few, being Northeastern, Wentworth, and Brigham, and Harvard, and Vertex. Again, we are been approved for a Chapter 74 career and technical education and health assisting program. So again, our request is really to seek approval of the MOU. It is an agreement between the Boston Public Schools and our school, and it talks a little bit about areas of operation, budget, facilities, staffing, and compliance. Again, this is not a new MOU. I'm so happy to say that this is my 4th one, being at the school for 18 years. So if you have any questions?
Well, thank you, Dr. Walker-Gregory, and we appreciate your brief presentation, especially at this late hour. We know you have school early in the morning, so we'll try to make this brief. And I thank you for recognizing my attendance at the graduation. It was my honor, and it was especially my honor given that you graduated our former student representative, Mr. McClay, who's now off in his freshman year at the Hult School of Business. Just briefly, I did want to ask, and maybe this can help make the questions from the members more efficient. I gave the MOU a brief review, and it appeared to me that there were no material changes to the MOU, or very minor language changes. And so I just ask you if there are any specific changes you want to call out for us that are notable. Otherwise, if there aren't, you can let us know that as well.
Yes, no specific changes. Of course, the only thing that kind of weighs heavy on my heart is probably facilities, but right now,
of course,
I mean, we have a facility, so it stays as is, and but right now everything is pretty much the same.
Well, thank you. I'm going to hold my questions for now and open up to fellow members for questions. I know Dean Robinson has a few questions to start.
So thank you for your presentation, and I'm always fascinated with just the specialized attention that you have, particularly at your school. I just wanted to ask, not necessarily, about the MOU, but just about the school in general, your additional pathways, because biotech is booming in this city and in this region. Can you highlight, just vision cast for us a bit of what do some of those additional pathways look like?
So in this brand new building that I'm going to get soon, right? I hope to have pathways for all my juniors. The idea right now is for health assisting, perhaps expanding into biotechnology and dental assisting. So the idea is to have tracks, choices actually, where juniors begin to choose which program, which pathway they like. So I can't at this point expand into other programs until I have sufficient space.
That would be really critical for the pathways even into higher ed, but then also to allow different organizations to see the great talent coming out of EMK very early on, and they can help groom the talent for their organizations. That, for me as a school committee member, is kind of the greatest win, is when the community of organizations sees the talent within BPS. So I'm really excited that this is a vision of yours kind of in the in the near future, and I look forward to hearing the updates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Dean Ms. Robinson.
Yes. I was just noting on your evidence of success is that you've had over 1,000 applications for 100 ninth grade seats. And so, I mean, I think this is an issue back for the district. You know, clearly students are looking for focus, and our lack of ability to handle significant numbers of kids wanting this kind of an opportunity. How does that help us to think in general about the kinds of opportunities that we're offering at the high school level? Because this is a glaring example of what people are looking for.
Absolutely, and I think that's a philosophical question that you asked that weighs a lot on the Parthenon report we received earlier this year that spoke to the off-track youth in our system, as well as just high school redesign, the general concept, how we think about our grade reconfiguration, what kind of career and technical pathways we're offering across the district to meet the needs of a 21st century education and career. And so, yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. This is a school in high demand. It's a school that's high achieving, and it's providing a service that is of interest to a number of the sectors within our local economy.
Yeah. What's the ideal size in growth?
So, you know, it's funny that you ask that, because I think you don't want to be too big. One thing I know is I know my students, I know my families, and when you get, I think, over 500 or 600, it gets like unmanageable for me, because I'm a personal person. But I do want to say—
Dr. Gregory, can you just bring the mic a little bit closer to your mouth?
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that. Yes, so like I said, I think over 600 becomes like unmanageable for me. If I want to continue to have that impact and know my kids in and out, it'll be more challenging. I do think small is always better, but I understand with, you know, the budget, you can only do so much. We started with 200 kids, right? That was like wonderful, and now that's 200's not going to work with the budget anymore, right? And so we've expanded, and we still are making impact, and we're still making progress. I just do know that being a graduate of the Boston Public Schools and being at EMK for 18 years, when you can send your own kids to your own school, you're making progress. So I feel like I'm in a space where I can send my own kids to my own school. We're making progress. Not there yet, but we're making progress.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
I'll leave it at that.
Dean Coleman.
Dr. Gregory, thank you for your time and your commitment and the work you do for our kids. We deeply appreciate it. And I want to follow up on Ms. Robinson's question, because the pilot school, in my understanding, one of the reasons we give you this opportunity, Horace Mann, of course, thank you. We create these opportunities and we fund them fully is so we can do some experimentation, find out what's working well. My question to you, and you offered it earlier, is what would be a good replication model? Not necessarily you getting bigger, obviously a new school that you can, would be wonderful, but what for the district would be a reasonable model of replication, and what would your role be in that, and how can we start thinking about that, because that's one of our huge needs.
We talked about this as a headmaster association, and I strongly believe that every high school needs a vocation. I think every high school should have a track. Like we're health, right? Not that I wouldn't be interested in computer technology or legal or law, but I think every high school should have some kind of vocation, because that's what's going to attract families and students. And so we're new in the process, but we're learning about how it works, and it also provides additional support for schools. So as we look at the configuration for schools and redesign, I think vocational can be a very great piece of information to review.
It's okay, Mr. Chair, if I follow up a little bit?
Please.
Yeah. So in terms of replicating this pragmatics of it, and the reason I'm following up, because I do think this is one of the biggest challenges facing us, in getting your wisdom and guidance on this is going to be very useful. So if you think about replicating and say, okay, you're going to have another vocational focus and another career technical education pathway, how do we think about an English High or Charleston, West Roxbury, where you had these significant physical plants, where the idea of shrinking them to 200, 500 students I don't think would be a reasonable option. How do we get the small within our large physical plants? When we've tried this before, with West Roxbury complex being an example of having 3 smaller schools that we then end up combining. So given the fact that it's been a struggle in the past, what would your ideas about how we could be more successful in the future, taking on some of these larger physical plants and creating small, high-touch environments within them?
It's not about the facility, right? It's about the culture. If you start focusing on the culture of your school, you can that's like the foundation. And once you build that culture, then you can strategically plan and figure out what makes sense by asking students, families, staff. That's how we came about, right? It stemmed from the community. And then there was this need of more nurses of color, right? And so it started grassroots. That's how HCA at that time came about. And then you start building that culture, right? So it's not like, oh, okay, we're gonna go in English High and fix it. Or it's really like, what is the need? And starting with the need of the community, you start to build a culture so that everybody's on the same pathway. Not easy, right? And so, I can continue to talk about this all day because I'm very passionate about it, but when you look at something like English High, it's really, they're offering pathways too. And just kind of, are you assessing what's going on? Are you evaluating? Is there a strategic plan? There's just a lot of variables, so it's not a quick fix.
Well, one last question, then I'll let you go. So I suspect, just like BC and Harvard and some of the great universities we have in this community, you have the gift of being able to be selective. You have a high application rate for a lower number of seats, so you already have a level of motivation. So how do we think about taking some of your successes, what you've done well in your program, into our comprehensive high schools, where you have a number of kids who didn't choose it, they're ninth grade repeaters, and how do we think about the value of a vocationally focused program where kids are not necessarily know to choose it, and how do we think through that dilemma? And that may be, you can say, look, it's too late at night, and I'll come back tomorrow when I'm fresher. I'd be willing to delay it, but I think this is a critical question that we have to think through.
I think what needs to happen around this is parents want choice, right? We have an application, yes, right? It's just address and phone number, really? And so why not have that for everybody, right? But the idea is if there is a focus, like health careers, the other one may be law, so then people begin to apply to whatever interest that they have. I'm not an expert, but I know there's other school systems that are doing this work. And if we continue to research and look at those models, I think we can have some more success.
Thank you very much, and I will repeat, we really welcome your offer to help us with this problem as we go through thinking about how to go forward.
I am
We'll
here.
turn to you for your guidance and wisdom. Thank you.
Mr. O'Neill, you have a brief question.
Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Walker Gregory. Always a pleasure to see you. You know, I'm a huge fan of the school and your work there. In fact, I'm not sure if you're aware, but one of your recent graduates, who was our school committee rep, has now started at Hult University, where he's on a full-ride scholarship that he was granted over
Very
the summer.
good.
So that's great to hear, and he's very proud to be a graduate of EMK, as you well know.
I thank you for opening your arms to him, all of you.
He was a wonderful representative to us for 2 years.
Thank you.
And he's very proud of being a graduate of your school. Quick question for you. I want to go to page 8 of the proposed operating agreement to a memorandum of understanding, specifically with regards to student discipline, section C. And this statement that EMK certifies and acknowledges that it has read and reviewed the BPS Code of Conduct. EMK may adopt the BPS Code of Conduct and/or may adopt its own policies pertaining to the conduct of students. Then you go on and say, of course, you'll comply with federal law. I want to push into this a little bit, and this is a conversation we have had with every in-district charter, because, as you know, we're very proud of the work that we've done around code of conduct, and we have really pushed on memorandums of understanding. It would be our desire to have everyone adapt the BPS code of conduct, and I'm concerned about what is in here. And so do you have issues with the code of conduct? Or are things that have been identified that you and your staff feel differently about?
No, I think this is just past language that's been used in past practices, but we follow the BPS Code of Conduct. I guess it perhaps gives autonomy if need be, I guess. I am a big advocate of non-suspension, right? We do progressive discipline. Suspension doesn't solve our problem. So the Code of Conduct we do follow. Obviously.
You follow the BPS Code of Conduct?
BPS Code of Conduct. We're really, the assistant headmasters get trained in it, and so we utilize pretty much everything the Boston Public Schools offer.
Okay, great. I will just ask if the district and you could talk about this offline before we vote on it formally, and maybe there's a way to reference that, in fact, you are following the BPS Code of Conduct, still giving you some autonomy, but
it gives you, I
it
think
may be
with all
better
the
if it
HARS
actually
NANs, they
references.
give you a little autonomy, I mean, but.
I understand that, but if we could just, if that's something we could take a look at.
Well,
Because, again, this becomes important to our conversations with all
With
of our
all the
in-district
others.
charters.
Mr. O'Neill will ask the superintendent to follow up on
Great,
that.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
question, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm remiss if I don't ask, you obviously have a BSAC rep.
Hey, that's my
because-
job now.
I'm sorry, okay.
If not two, right? Yeah,
I'm
we're
done.
all set with
He
BSAC.
can ask the question.
Do you have a parent rep to the citywide Parents Council that you're aware of?
That we probably do not have right at this second.
And a parent rep to SPEDPAC?
Probably not at this second.
Okay.
We have some representatives from last year, but they have now graduated.
Great. So new school year, new opportunity.
That's right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. O'Neill. Thank you, Dr. Walker Gregory. We're always happy to have you before us. You've been a longstanding supporter of the district and member of the district in many capacities, and we always appreciate visiting your school and seeing the work that goes on there. And we appreciate the fact that you're coming back to renew this agreement once again. So we'll look forward at the next meeting to take action on this MOU, and that'll be September 26th.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on now to our next report, an update on student activity accounts. At this time, I'd like to invite our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Eleanor Lawrence, as well as Anu Jainath, our Director of Federal and State Grants, to please step forward with their presentation. First, I'll turn it over to the Interim Superintendent for opening comments.
That's right. And Eleanor Lawrence, our CFO, is going to be joined both by Ed Glora, our business manager, as well as Anu Jayanth, our Senior Director of Grants and External Funding. And I want to thank all three of them for their incredible effort in building a new system rolling forward that supports the administration of student activity account funds across the district. On August 31st, as I think all of us know, the City of Boston publicly released the findings of an extensive audit by the firm Ernst & Young on 118 school student activity accounts in BPS. These results are publicly available on our website, bostonpublicschools.org. Also available on that website is the new Student Activity Accounts Fund support page that assists our school leaders and school communities in meeting the terms of the new system that was developed. Tonight, CFO Eleanor Lawrence will provide an overview of those findings and the protocols that have already been put into place to ensure fiscal stewardship of these funds. As part of our action plan for improvement, tonight we are proposing the adoption of a policy that would establish a comprehensive set of rules and procedures for student activity fund management. So I'll hand things over to Eleanor, Ed, and Anu from here.
Thank you. Good evening, school committee members.
Good evening.
I'll start by defining what is a student activity account. Student activity accounts are bank accounts that are used by individual schools to manage funds associated with student activities. The Massachusetts general laws defined what student activity accounts are, and they include 3 criteria. 1, that the activity is co-curricular in nature. 2nd, that it's contingent on fees from students and families. And 3rd, that it's for the benefit of students. So with that definition, some of the examples of eligible student activities include prom, yearbook, student clubs, field trips. Ineligible activities include things such as staff gifts and luncheons, staff appreciation events, because those are not directly for the benefit of students, before and after school programs, and supplies, equipment, and other materials for the classroom. Those are considered not to be co-curricular, but to be foundational to the core delivery of instruction in the classroom. EY, Ernst & Young, the accounting firm, was retained by the City of Boston following an audit by the Internal Revenue Service that included a review of student activity accounts at 16 randomly chosen schools. The EY work included reviewing fund and activity use in these accounts, assessing key internal controls that we had district-wide, and reviewing historical transaction at 118 of our schools. As Laura mentioned, the results of the report have been posted online, and that includes a memo for each of those 118 schools that were in scope. Just to frame our conversation for the evening, I want to be clear that I cannot personally comment on the EY audit specifically, but I can tell you that our focus has been on learning from their work and incorporating their feedback into our new system. So I want to turn now to what we've done in response to the EY audit. At this point, we believe we have addressed or are in the process of addressing every one of the recommendations that was in the EY report. We've been working very closely with the City of Boston. I want to recognize, in fact, the CFO from the City of Boston, Emma Handy, who's joined us this evening. This has been a real partnership. Some of the steps that we've taken are outlined here on page 4. We've set up a master bank account, which we call the agency account, at Citizens Bank, which houses all student activity funds for all BPS schools. And that master agency account includes sub-accounts for every school and, in fact, every single activity as well. We've completely discontinued the use of debit cards and checkbooks. Each school will spend their student activity funds through the city's PeopleSoft financial system, just as any other city funds would be expended. And we have launched what we consider quite robust training and resources for our school staff. We trained all of our school leaders in small groups during the August Leadership Institute a couple of weeks ago. We've trained our school secretaries, central office staff. We published a large and comprehensive manual, and we also made everything available online electronically so it would be easy to use and search. We are here tonight to ask for your approval on the proposed policy. The policy has been distributed. It's a fairly simple one-page document. As I mentioned earlier, Mass General laws outline what is a student activity account, and the MGLs do ask that school boards and school committees authorize the district and the superintendent to conduct these activities. So that's what this policy does. We've summarized it on slides 5 and 6. I'll go through a few highlights of the proposed policy. In a nutshell, the policy, should you approve it, would authorize the City of Boston's collector-treasurer to establish and maintain student activity accounts. This would in effect allow school leaders to accept money for recognized activities. School leaders could accept gifts to the recognized activities, and school leaders could request and authorize disbursements for the recognized activities with all of the appropriate documentation, of course. The policy also highlights a number of what we consider best practices. For instance, going forward with our new system in place, the policy outlines that school leaders have the responsibility to ensure that their school is in compliance with the policy. I do want to highlight that we believe strongly that it's central office's responsibility to ensure that school leaders have the tools and resources they need to meet the terms of the new policy, but we also still believe in delineating the responsibility of school leaders once those appropriate supports are in place. The policy also states that no other accounts may be established using the City of Boston's tax identification number, and outlines a process for regular review and auditing of the funds going forward. So with that overview of the policy, we'd be delighted to opening it up to questions.
I only have one question. Thank you. I am just curious about the school leaders accepting money. How do you track that? So is there a receipt? I mean, how do you even know? So I mean, I just think of in my own work, if somebody gave me money, so how, I don't know if I'm asking the question well enough, but basically just making sure that, I'm not saying that any school leader would take money, but I just, you know, thinking in terms of what is the process and how do you know? Like, is there a receipt? Is there, people can't take cash, it's only a check or whatever?
So the majority of funds we expect to have collected by check, and the checks will be deposited to Citizens Bank. We have outlined a very detailed cash management process, which includes issuing receipts for the receipt of cash. So we have outlined a process by which each school should have a cash box. We've outlined the amount of cash that should be present in the cash box. It's not recommended to exceed $200 at the beginning or the end of the year. It will be reconciled over the course of the year with receipts for, was it anything over $25? That was the threshold, I believe. Yeah, so we have very detailed procedures for cash management.
Okay, good. And I'm just curious, because we had some testimony about the challenges that schools will face. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We are making a transition, and I said this to every one of our school leaders. I said we are balancing, on one hand, the very clear need to address the issues that were outlined in the EY report, and on the other hand, the fact that we are all here to serve our schools and our students, and we are trying to balance that. Undoubtedly, as we go through the transition of launching this new system, we're going to have some stumbles, and we've really put a plea out to our school leaders to tell us if there are things that aren't working. We are trying to be exceptionally responsive, but we are going from a system that didn't have the appropriate bookkeeping and record keeping to one that does, and there are going to be some growing pains associated from going from the old system to the new. So I'm going to follow up with the individuals who spoke tonight and make sure we incorporate their feedback to make things as painless as they can be while ensuring the degree of controls and compliance that I think all of us want for the system.
Yeah, that would be great, just because, I mean, I think of, running a youth organization. We can't expect, somebody said a bus or a plane or whatever, that they're gonna, on good faith, take us there. So I just would appreciate, definitely, thank you for saying that, and that to work more closely, because we don't want to make it more challenging for any school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Robinson.
Yeah, I just wanted
Thank you,
to
Ms.
follow up
Oliver.
a little bit on what Alex said. Thank you for this, and I really understand the reasoning for the policy, but also realizing that we have to train our school staff. What about the folks on the other end who also will be interacting with them? And so in terms of some of the issues that we heard tonight about people feeling that they were not respected from folks that they need to get the money back from or to get checks written from, or not being as respectful to their needs, so that it's not just training the school side, it's really trying to make sure that if it's a policy, that it's everybody's new policy, and to help one another learn the processes and not just.
Sorry, to clarify, the people you meant on the other end, do you mean school parents and teachers? Sorry.
Yes, we know that the policy means to train the school staff to do better about putting the receipts in, et cetera. But just listening to one of the comments that were made tonight about the way that the school personnel felt that they had been treated by people on the other end in terms of either demanding receipts in a way, et cetera. My question is a balance of training on both sides, because there's learning to be had on both sides of this, not just on one side. And how can we make sure that it's an equally implemented policy on all sides?
Yeah. So, did you want to say something, Ed?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that one of the...
Ed, you want to pull that a little closer to you?
Sure. One of the goals of what we are trying to do is to bring the management and the expenditure of student activity accounts in line with how all other funds are expended in the district. And in each school, there's at least 2 staff members that are trained in the use of the financial system, and they should be familiar with the operations of the system. Where there's a void there, we have had ongoing training. There was one as recently as today. We've incorporated and brought focus on student activity accounts into that training. Those trainings will continue throughout the year. I wanted to echo what Eleanor had said earlier. We worked in great collaboration with the city finance departments. There were cases where fundraising ended on a particular day at noontime for one of our larger high schools, and they needed a check in advance of the prom the next day. And working with the city departments, that happened. So we've really tried to get out in front, and I am not personally aware of any planned activity that did not happen because we were unable to reduce payment either after or before the event happened.
And I have said to our school leaders, and I'll say it to our committee members so that if you run into folks, you can pass on the message. I know that people are sometimes frustrated because we do put controls in place to ensure all the safeguards we need. When in doubt, we ask people call or email us. Sometimes they assume we can't do things. Ed has worked some miracles for quite a few high school proms this spring. And so if people are frustrated, please just tell them to call us or email us as we're working out the kinks in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Dr. Uriarte.
Thank you for this. I mean, I have similar concerns as the ones that have just been raised, and very concerned about the unintended consequences of this. Just thinking through how people operate with small funds, which is what we're talking. We're not talking about big funds. We're talking about,
Yeah.
So it was pretty clear to me that there needs to be, there needs to be rules about paying people without paying taxes. I mean, the kinds of things that got us in trouble. I am less concerned about the payment for transportation for the Latin club, or that, from BLA that was testifying. And I think that's a different kettle of fish. Remember, I did, for 35 years dealt with the Massachusetts, system, which is very similar to yours. So that, we're talking about two very different types of expenditures. I also know that teachers, like professors or deans, are not necessarily born with accountant skills, right? It is not part
Dr.
of
Uriarty,
what
don't you
is-
want to bring a growth mindset to that equation?
What?
But some of us are learners.
Well, I mean, maybe in the business school, yes, but not for the general. And I think we assume that people know a lot more than they actually do in terms of really following and being able to do this. So I want you to talk to me a little bit about the training that you're doing. What I've heard is that it's light, and that if you know accounting, you're gonna pick it up. If you don't, it goes right over your head. So I wanna know a little bit about the kind of training that you're doing, the kind of follow-up that you're doing with this. What we don't want is to begin in a sort of victim-blaming type of situation in which the poor secretary in a school is not gonna bear the burden of doing this right when she has never had any training. So that's my first question. I really wanna understand how you're approaching that. The quality of the training, the quality of the support, the quality of the follow-up that you're gonna do. The other is how you're gonna
Dr.
handle
Uriarte?
those small expenditures.
If I can interrupt, I think it might be productive for us if we heard an answer from, on the first question, and then we come back.
I'll let Anu talk a little bit about some of the specifics. I just want to start by sharing a sentiment. We share your concern. We have been, I think when you read the EY report, it's very clear we
Feel
need
my
to
pain.
act,
You
and we
feel
need
my
to,
pain.
yes. When you look at the EY report, it's clear we need to act and we need to make changes. And we believe we've implemented a system that addresses the concerns. We need to be equally concerned about making sure schools can conduct their business. And so that is why Anu, Ed, and I personally went to every training for our small groups of principals, and we've made ourselves personally available to hear from them because, as I said, we are still working some of the kinks out. But Anu, why don't you talk through some of the specifics of what we've done so far?
Sure. So I think the beauty of how we've built this process is that it mirrors exactly how schools spend their grant and general funds right now. So it's all coming through the financial system. So you're right, the training so far has just been in the small group settings in the August Leadership Institute. So what we've built is a user-friendly website, which is very, very clear drop-downs as to how do I make a deposit, how do I expend money from this, how do I make a transfer. But built within that is a 30-page manual that speaks to the intricacies of a cash box policy. How do you do your checks and balances? We have templates built in to show how schools can collect revenue at a fundraiser. The next step in our training is going to be, we're going to be reaching out to schools via our bulletin to say, these are our open house times, for lack of a better word, and we will come out to your school and work with you on individual questions, because every school is unique in terms of the fundraising that they do or in terms of the types of things that they're trying to pay out. Like, for example, a school just called me today about uniform sales. I'm collecting funds for grades 6, 7, and 8, but then there might be a little extra money left after the uniform sales. What do I do with that money? So every school has a different question. So what we're trying to do with the next step of training is just reaching out to them and going out to their schools individually.
Okay, just feedback from a teacher. 30 pages of, language that nobody understands is language that nobody understands.
Yes, exactly, and that's why the website is the user-friendly piece of this. The manual, yes, is in there as backup with more details for any step-by-step process that they need, but the website is really their go-to place for questions, simple FAQs and stuff.
Have you considered maybe having, for example, any expenditures over $50 go through this process? Anything under $50, the school can, deal with it. I'm concerned about schools sort of keeping money in a drawer for the kinds of expenditures that are too small to generate this level of bureaucracy from their point of view. It costs them more to go through all this level of bureaucracy than it is to actually just have have some money in a corner that they just use. What I'm trying to, that is the unintended consequence that I am seeing in what you're proposing.
Well, we have concerns about allowing petty cash in schools. We think when there is cash floating around schools, it opens us up to bad things happening. And there is a cost to addressing that, and it is some degree of what you're calling the bureaucracy, which I admit there is some of that here. I hope that there is a transition period that feels a little bit painful as people are learning the new system, but once we get through that, it really won't be overly burdensome. Just to give examples, we have, people can get reimbursed. This example that came up was the batteries died in the remote control for the clicker right before my parent presentation. I need to run out and get batteries. Well, we can reimburse you, and once you get through the first time of being set up to get reimbursement, which will feel like something new the first time you do it, every time after that it will be a lot easier. So we really feel like in order to ensure the appropriate fiscal controls for the district, we need to put these measures in place. The burden is on our team to make sure we can support schools in the new system.
What I'm concerned about is people getting into more trouble by hiding money from you. Unintended consequences. When you're setting up very complex systems, you know that people are going to try to go around them. So what I'm saying is pay attention to that and figure out how you can help people be good. Help people be good with this money so that they're not sort of saying this is going to take me 3 hours to get refunded. Let me just put money in a box.
So, and just to be crystal clear, because there are certain lines here that we have to be very firm about, that is why there is a statement that going forward, once we have the appropriate supports in place, we do need school leaders to take the responsibility that they're not going to say the bureaucracy is too difficult, I just am going to work around it. Issues of fiscal integrity are important. And even though there is some pain involved for people to learn the new system, I think the EY report makes it clear that certain aspects of this have to be non-negotiable.
Yes.
So knowing that bar needs to be high and we need to not move it, again, I think of my job and our team's job is to make it as easy and painless as possible, but not to lower the bar, because I think what we found is that when there is cash running around schools, it made people's lives a little bit easier, but it also led to some mistakes that we really don't want to have in the future.
No, I'm not saying don't raise the bar high.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is know that that there's a cost to raising the bar high.
Yes, agree.
And that you need to sort of predict what that cost would be. See, at this point, I don't have an idea of the universe of things that, of issues or expenditures that school have. Do you?
How much is being expended in these categories?
No, in what?
In what? We have anecdotal, not quantitative.
See, that would be something that I think would be worthwhile really documenting what it is that they're using their money for, and then seeing how you can help them be good.
Yep, that's a great idea. And our new system actually will allow us to quantitatively analyze that.
Okay. That's my,
Thank you. And your concerns are noted, and again, I'll just restate our commitment to supporting schools as much as we can through the transition and being customer service oriented wherever we can.
How often are you going to report on this?
I'll look to the school committee with whatever frequency you guys would like to hear about it. We also could provide written updates on how the new system is going.
Yeah.
I think we can discuss that in our calendaring session. Thank you, Dr. Uriarte. I'm going to go briefly to Dean Robinson, who has a quick follow-up question, and then to Mr. O'Neill.
And helping people be good, and recognizing that probably what people are spending the funds are for the kids.
Yeah.
And so there is that sense of the clicker ran out, or I wanted to do something for the kids. So knowing that there are good people doing good things for our kids. Is it possible, just to the point of the training, the 30 pages, is it possible to make the training and the access so easy, kind of like a video tutorial? I'm watching middle schoolers just YouTube videos all day long of easy things. There's not a lot of talking. It's just showing you how to make this happen. And it's very much 3 to 4 minutes. Is it possible you all can think really creatively in the simplest way to just allow new leaders, new school leaders, new teachers, staff members? Because we saw earlier many new school leaders. Everyone has to get onboarded very quickly, understanding new processes, new systems in place. The accountability is high. So with the high turnover and the frequency that leaders and staff are learning new systems, is it just possible to think as creatively and simply around the 30 pages? Because that stuck out to me as well.
Absolutely. So as part of the August Leadership Institute, we did put out a video, which was a quick overview tutorial.
I think it
as
was
well.
7 minutes, though.
It was 7 minutes.
We'll try to get it to 4.
So, and as part of that, we've also been talking about actually putting out a webinar or some kind of other live videos, which are like step-by-step, how can we show school leaders. The reason why we're also leaning more towards just the one-on-ones and having these trainings in maybe different areas of the city is because so many school leaders have more unique questions that may not all be answered with just like one video.
Right, right. And I would, I know our BSAC rep isn't here, but I'm always a fan of employing high schoolers to help think about solving these problems. And because they are the generation that is very tech savvy, they could probably provide some solutions to skimming down 3 minutes, making it user-friendly so that multiple audiences can understand.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dean Robinson. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll be real short with my comments because the notes I actually wrote down I wanted to ask about, Dr. Uriarte already hit. I had what are the unintended consequences you're concerned about and what are potential workarounds that you're afraid school leaders are going to do. Because like everyone, I am concerned about, what's the expression, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? That, do we have serious issues of what's going on in student accounts? Absolutely. And Ms. Lauren, you are absolutely right. This is necessary to do. I think I've worked in about 5 companies in my career, and I've ranted and raved about every single one of the accounts reimbursable policies of how to get reimbursed for stuff, that this is ridiculous, you don't understand what we're doing. But it's there for a reason. And the bottom line is, this is in just about every case, money from parents or community members or students. And we can't forget that. And is it a pain in the neck for that we're going to put staff members and school leaders who have 18,000 other jobs to do to follow a paperwork trail? Yes. But is it about transparency to our community members and parents and students that their dollars are being spent appropriately? That's the bottom line.
Yes.
And so we do have to remember that. And yes, it's going to be a pain in the neck. But I really appreciate your comments where you said you're going to speak to the folks who testified earlier, because that's some great grassroots, feet on the ground experience of how this may impact them. And to hear the comment from one woman who testified about, and I'm not sure if this is proper, it may not be, maybe she was told it earlier on, you can only be reimbursed after the fact, and that's not how bus companies and that's not how airplanes. I see Mr. Glover shaking his head no, so I think that has been changed, or?
We do hundreds of bus trips a year for the schools in the district, and the majority of those are done with purchase orders through the system. There's no need for anybody to put money up front in advance of a field trip.
Okay, so this is just part of the learning process for folks to go through, but the commitment from you to work with the school leaders, and I know it's there from you and I work closely together, we hear it through the budget process from the school leaders, but this is critical, and it's not just the school leaders, it's the school secretaries, it's the club volunteers, it's the athletic coaches, it's all the others that are doing things. It's a pain in the neck process, but we do have to get there. But I particularly want to concur with what Dr. Uriarte was saying of, let's think about how we test on the pain level here, right? We don't want to have a blanket policy that's on everything. particularly as you look through how much is reimbursed for this, how much is reimbursed for that. How can we streamline processes that take care of 75% of the reimbursements? And school leaders knowing that, I know that the 5 things that, you have 20 requests in the past year, and 15 of them were in these 3 categories, and we have a streamlined process for these 3 categories, so we really don't have to worry about the paperwork on the others. Could go a long way. But this is a learning process.
Thank you.
One more quick question. On the proposed policy, line item 6, the superintendent or the chief financial officer shall review insurance coverage to ensure that all employees who handle the student activities monies are covered either by an endorsement to a liability policy or through a separate bond issued by insurance company. Isn't the city of Boston and the district self-insured?
Not
Or
for
do we
that.
have fidelity
Not
bonds?
for, go ahead, Ed.
Not for that.
We have a fidelity
But we
bond?
already have secured the necessary policy that you just spoke of.
So it's a fidelity bond?
Yes.
Okay, good. Great. So good. Glad to know that. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. I just, I want to take a moment to say thank you once again for all this hard work that's gone into reviewing the initial audit that occurred last year. I know you put a lot of work into thinking about not only where are the holes here, and working with our partners at EY, of course, thank you, but thinking about how to, make this a digestible policy, and that's the product that we have before us today. I want to say, I think you've heard it throughout the comments. These are strong financial controls. Those are controls that we need to ensure that we avoid any sort of embarrassing snafus in the future. Sometimes they can be the product of ill intent. Sometimes they can just be the product of not knowing how to properly handle funds. And so providing people with the guidance on how to do that through a policy is very important. I think we've had a few questions around training this evening. Something that stuck out to me when I looked in the policy was it appears that you mandate some, not in the policy, but you're looking to mandate some sort of training before people have access to funds at the school level. Is that something that you contemplated putting into the policy as a mandate prior to granting someone access to funds? And if not, why not?
Do you want to talk about our base financials training? I think that's what he's referring to.
Sure. What we've attempted to do is, with the student activity accounts, bring those funds and the use of the funds and the expenditure and control of the funds in conformance with how all other funds in the district are expended. And what we're trying to do also is minimize the instances and the necessity of reimbursements.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're encouraging schools to do, and it's a big change for them because they are used to expending funds and getting reimbursed, but rather minimize that by encouraging them to using rec to PO so that they're not putting money out of pocket, and that's not necessary for school staff to do that. And that's a big change for them. And when we are able to open up dialogue with schools and encourage them to do that, they are finding a bit of relief in that, and they are already familiar with, they have several members, staff members in each school that are already familiar with the PeopleSoft financial system. And the efficiencies in that system make it very easy for them to work through and get whatever goods or services they need.
So
And
actually taking a step.
Sorry, just to sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but to clarify, we do require training on the PeopleSoft financial system to give access to that system, which I think might be what you are referring
Well,
to.
so that's right. So taking a step back, it's not a question of training new people, a whole cadre of new people
No.
to be able to perform a financial transaction. It's taking the people that maybe were performing financial transactions in the schools in the past and redirecting them to the people that are trained
Yes.
on the systems to do it in a manner that's compliant with the policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's very helpful.
And it's also important to note that there are, the student activity account funds, everybody recognized, is money that is owned by the students.
Right.
And by law, there are some flexibilities that exist with those funds that don't exist with other funds that manage through the city. Because the state procurement law, Chapter 30B, does not apply to those funds. So, for instance, when the school was having their prom, East Boston High, for instance, was having their prom, they were able to select the location where they were going to have their
They didn't have
prom
to put it out to
without
bid.
going through the bidding process, et cetera.
Right.
So they do enjoy greater flexibility, and we work very closely with them to make sure that happens.
Right. So I have one other question about some of the funds that may have been previously utilized out of the student activity accounts for non-student activities. So I don't want to go down the road of paying for staff that maybe worked in a before care or after care. That's obviously out of bounds, and that would be proper for an independent contractor or some other employment type or similar relationship. But if we're thinking about expenditures for, say, a staff retirement party,
Yep.
Or pizzas at a PD session or something along those lines, what are the alternative accounts that schools have available to them to account for those types of expenditures?
We reached out to school leaders and through our academic superintendents, and we collected dozens of instances exactly like you're giving examples of. And in fact, if you go to the website in our FAQ, we grouped them by category and gave examples, and for each of them said, you know, you may have used a student activity account for this in the past. Here's the right way to do it. And with dozens of instances that we were given, we could only come up with one instance that we couldn't find an appropriate path for, which was to reimburse parents for travel. Every other school leader request, we were able to give an alternate and more appropriate financial mechanism for making the payment.
And in most of those instances, it's going to go through the same type of payment request system that you described for student activity accounts, but it'll be directed to a different account.
Often, but not always.
Okay.
So an example, for instance, teachers call them sunshine funds, where staff will get together and collect funds to send flowers if a loved one passes, or to celebrate a retirement. You know, that's an example which is really private citizens coming together for each other.
Right.
There's no reason for those funds to enter a City of Boston bank account. And in fact, when they do, it triggers tax implications that none of us would want. So there are some instances such as that where we have encouraged private citizens who are conducting private business to keep the money private.
Right.
But for the most part, yes, we have City of Boston and BPS mechanisms to be used.
Very good. Well, thank you. I know we look forward to taking action on this policy at our next meeting, and we appreciate your presentation. Ms. Jinath, Mr. Glora, thank you. Ms. Lawrence, we're going to ask you to stay up here for the next presentation. And
Michael, can I have,
I'm sorry?
Can I make a comment?
You have one brief question?
Very brief.
Okay.
Could we have answers to some of the questions that we've raised here about the training, the quality of the training, and the sort of the way that you're thinking about dealing with the unintended consequences before we vote on this next time?
Yes, absolutely. We can put that together and send it electronically.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And you know, I neglected one more thank you, Miss Emma Handy, our treasurer for the City of Boston,
CFO.
and CFO. Thank you. I know she wears many hats. Thank you for joining us this evening and supporting us in this process. Okay, we'll move on now to our final report. It's an update on the school committee's internal audit task force. You recall that last December, the committee approved the formation of an internal audit task force by a vote. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. O'Neill, for spearheading this effort on behalf of the committee and really continuing over the last year to move this internal audit task force into its present form. Tonight, Mr. O'Neill is going to submit for the committee's consideration a formal charge for the task force and its recommended membership. I want to also welcome to the podium Mr. Scott Baranowski. He's a partner with Wolf & Company, and an audit firm in the City of Boston, who's going to be a recommended member of the audit task force, as well as a recommended co-chair for the task force. So welcome, Mr. Baranowski, and thank you for bearing with us in this late hour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I was delighted that the city's chief financial officer, Ms. Handy, was with us. I'm sorry she just walked out. It was so nice to finally be able to put a face to the signature that I see on the quarterly tax bill and the auto excise tax bill and all the bills from the city. So it was delightful that she was able to join us, and thank her for her work with the district. Good evening, fellow members. This is a follow-up to the vote we took in December 2017 regarding the formation of an internal audit task force as a task force of the school committee. As the chair said, in front of you is Mr. Scott Baranowski. He's a partner at Wolf & Company, one of Boston's many outstanding accounting firms. And he happens to be the partner in charge of their internal audit process. So I met Mr. Baranowski through their president and CFO, Mark O'Connell, who a gentleman at Wolf & Company by the name of Peter Wolf, who was former CFO of the Chamber of Commerce, Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and explained our interest in putting in place an internal audit process, and we wanted to get help from the internal audit community in the city of Boston. Wolf & Company is extremely well respected for their internal audit practice. Mr. Baranowski is actually the partner in charge of it, and he graciously agreed to really lead this effort to reach out to the internal audit community, both in other accounting firms and in large and small businesses in the Boston area, and check on interest in the community in helping us with this task force, because under the guidelines that we talked about in December, we wanted some auditing professionals from the Boston accounting community, at least one professor of accounting and or of internal audit in one of the institutions of higher learning in the Boston area. We wanted an independent CPA from a Boston neighborhood, hopefully one college-level student of accounting, preferably a graduate of Boston Public Schools, and one Boston School Committee member. And so the chair asked me to follow up on this, and working with Mr. Baranowski, we were able to reach out, and I'm going to ask Mr. Baranowski to speak about this, the outreach effort that we undertook. And quite frankly, we were overwhelmed by the amount of people interested in helping us, from large, small companies, nonprofits, a whole range of industries. And this is actually a culled down list from many conversations we had together over the course of the spring and the summer. I think Mr. Baranowski knows my pitch about why internal audit is so important for BPS and for the school committee by heart at this point. He can give it himself. Hopefully he doesn't hear it in his sleep. But I also want to thank Ms. Eleanor Lawrence, because we have been working with her on this. True successful internal audit is not a gotcha mentality. So this is so critical in the philosophy of how this gets set up to begin with. We are stewards of taxpayer dollars. And if parents, as we talked about in student accounts, if parents and students and teachers and taxpayers in the city don't believe that we are judiciously spending taxpayer dollars, we have difficulty in asking for more, quite frankly. And so good housekeeping starts at home, and as wonderful a job as Ms. Lauren has done succeeding Mr. McDonough as Chief Financial Officer for our district, and the work that they have done, a good organization has an independent group internally that checks things over, that does sanity checks, that looks around the corner. As someone who has run business units in the past, I have always tried to have great relationships with the legal department, the compliance department, and the internal audit department, because I view those as the partners to look around the corner and see risk coming that you don't see otherwise. So Ms. Lawrence and I have had extensive conversations about this, about the philosophy of internal audit within BPS, and that we very much want this something that the interim superintendent and the permanent superintendent embrace wholeheartedly, as, by the way, has the chief auditor of the city of Boston, and Ms. Lawrence can speak to that as well. She has been very supportive of this effort to have BPS looking more closely at internal audit itself. But that it's not a gotcha mentality, trying to catch staff in problems, but in fact is a proactive partner working on high-level risks of what are the natural things that folks should be looking for and digging down over time. As part of last year's budget, there were positions, there was money put in the budget for internal audit and several staff members. And so this task force would be charged with what's the overall philosophy, what is a policy we should consider, and then what would a sample audit plan look like in the first year and in successive years. And lastly, what are the characteristics are we looking for in an internal auditor that would make sense for the district to choose in that position. But I'd like to stop for a moment and turn it over to Mr. Baranowski, and you can talk for a little bit about how we tried to put together this task force, the folks we spoke with, and who was recommended.
Sure. Thanks very much, Mr. O'Neill. And again, good evening, everyone, and thanks very much for having me tonight. This is an exciting opportunity. It's one that doesn't come along all that often. You know, Boston Public Schools looking for help in the internal audit field, and guess what? I'm an internal auditor, so that was a nice fit right out of the gate, and I'm glad that Michael reached out to my CEO, Mark O'Connell, to see how Wolf & Company might be able to help. It was an easy sell. Mike did a real good job with it, trying to be able to position it in a way of how can you give back to a community that's given so much to us. The schools are, you know, where the future leaders are being made as we speak, and it was a rewarding opportunity to come out and try to not necessarily pitch, but just identify what the opportunity is and find people who had the time and the availability to do it. So it was a reach out of a personal network. It was reach out of colleagues at Wolf & Company. It was a reach out to different organizations, the Institute of Internal Auditing, the Boston chapter, as well as the Mass Bank Internal Audit Group, that allowed us to have those dialogues and find people who had the time and the skill sets needed in order to properly represent the diversity of the school district and to be able to provide their experience and expertise on a volunteer basis over the next several months as we try to identify what Mr. O'Neill said, put together a charter, put together a risk assessment process, and ultimately find and list out the traits and characteristics of who would lead the internal audit charge here for BPS. So I don't know if you'd like me to go through just a high level of who the individuals are who are
absolutely,
on the
please. Thank you.
roster. Great. And so we've already spent way too much time talking about me, so I'll move on to Ms. Judy Gonzalez. She is the head of internal audit at Liberty Mutual Insurance. Prior to that, she worked at EY for 14 years and is just well respected as a Fortune 100 company to be headquartered here in Boston, be able to tap into those worldwide resources and knowledge as to what's going on in the internal audit group at her institution, as well as how that transfers off to the Boston Public Schools. I think it's just a home run and something that I'm real excited about, those opportunities. One thing, though, that I needed to keep in check was we're talking with a grassroots, a small effort right out of the gate, and that's where Mr. Tom Burton comes into play. He's the head of internal audit at Cambridge Savings Bank, and he's got a team of 3. So he's doing an awful lot of work with limited resources, and I think Tom would be able to provide an awful lot of insight as to how to do more with less. So excited about Tom being on the roster as well. Mr. David Dyson is currently at the Nature Conservancy, which is obviously a not-for-profit organization, but Dave also has a large experience with businesses as well and has run shops of all shapes and sizes on the internal audit side, including iRobot, to name a few. So if you have a vacuum cleaner that does the work for you at home, and Dave's company helped with that. So known Dave for a while, and I think his insights in a whole host of areas would be real beneficial to the group. We do have one tentative member on the roster, and that's Dr. Joy Gray out of Bentley. Some time constraints have come up, and she's working on things with her department head just to be able to identify whether or not she'll be able to invest the time needed in order to be successful with the task force. If for whatever reason Professor Gray can't do the work, she's going to identify some other candidates to help us out. So really looking forward to having Professor Gray be part of the team, but if not, we'll be able to find suitable replacements hopefully before the 26th when that meeting takes place. Next on the task force is Ranjani Narayan out of Deloitte and Touche. Ranjani is well respected and a national speaker on internal audit out of Deloitte, and one of the unique areas that she's focused on is agile internal auditing, again doing more with less and being able to take lessons learned that Ranjani's seen at other organizations and bring forward to the Boston Public Schools. I think is an exciting thing for us to be able to do, and look forward to that. Hopefully I'm not on the clock. All right. The next individual on the task force, and we took a flyer on this one, it's Mr. Mike O'Neill. So again, Mike, thanks very much for your time and guidance so far, and look forward to working with you as the task force actually starts putting some elbow grease into the process and gets pen to paper and moves forward. Mike's been an invaluable resource up to this point in time, and I look forward to working with him on this project into the future. Just two more individuals. The next is Marcia Shao out of Manulife, John Hancock, and Marcia's job at Manulife is pretty unique. She's in charge of professional practices, which basically means she's making sure that the internal auditors at Manulife are doing what they should be doing on a go-forward basis, and that's, again, invaluable experience and expertise that we can use to make sure that we're following the IIA standards and the other standards that are out there to make sure that we're starting off a grassroots effort in the right way. And last but certainly not least is Shahira Wade out of State Street. She's a proud graduate of Boston Public Schools and has a large track record of philanthropic efforts throughout her career, and is real excited about the opportunity to be able to give back to the Boston Public Schools. So that's our roster of 9 individuals, and just wanted to pass it back over to Mr. O'Neill and the committee to see if there are any questions.
Thank you very much. So I did also want to comment on Ms. Shahira Wade, because interestingly, she's a finance professional at State Street and runs a business line and is now a compliance officer. So she's not an internal audit professional, but the reason we were extremely attracted to this, to her, and not just for the fact that she's a BPS grad, but that she also brings a business line perspective of not just having all internal audit professionals sitting there, but the business line will often think in terms about how would this work, and so bringing that perspective of how they could work with finance and the other various units within BPS is critical. I will also say about Ms. Wade, we have all had the experience when we meet a young person and we find out after the fact that they were a Posse Scholar, and we say, of course you were, right? Same thing with Ms. Wade. She was also a Posse Scholar and went to Bryn Mawr. And she's, I will say, Ms. Robinson, I'll put it mildly when I say she's extraordinarily proud to be a BLA grad. So, and then we are still working on a couple of other potentials. We were not able to identify a local CPA in the community, but I thank Ms. Oliver Davila for some suggestions, as well as Dr. Uriarte, and I believe we're going to, hopefully going to be able to come up with someone additional to recommend for that spot as well. Ms. Lawrence, I'd love to just turn to you for 1 second on your thoughts about putting this together and working with the task force and how you see internal audit fitting in.
I just want to start by thanking Mr. Baranowski and Mr. O'Neill for spearheading this. I am incredibly enthusiastic about this line of work and appreciative of all of the work that's already gone into it and that will go in the future. You know, I think Mr. O'Neill just said it perfectly. It is so important that we deserve and earn the public's trust about the work we do to be responsible stewards of public dollars. And I think to the extent that this work helps us reinforce that trust, identify risk, mitigate risk, it helps us serve kids because that trust is really important to the work we do every day. So thank you both in advance. I'm just incredibly supportive. I look forward to partnering. I appreciate all the things Mr. O'Neill said about making this practical, making it something we can operationalize and implement, even if we do have a small and lean team. And so I really look forward to working with everyone on this.
Likewise.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. And I just want to point out one additional thing. Putting together this task force was very different from typical task force that we do, where we typically start from the viewpoint of, do we have a school leader, do we have a parent, so on and so forth. And in internal audit, what you are really striving for is independence, to in fact not have people that bring a perspective of a particular school, of a particular classroom, or a particular program, but are just outside financial professionals that are looking at $1.1 billion budget and what are the best ways to have financial controls in place to ensure it's being done right. So in fact, this was 100% about, did we want to make sure that there were, that the task force as much as possible represented the district? Absolutely. But the driving factor was folks that have financial experience and particularly internal audit that can really bring some best practices for us as the deciding body to decide on. And so we did take a very different tact. We had laid it out originally that way, that the primary, in December, we said the primary qualification would be focused on auditing expertise. But I just want to point out that this is different from what we typically do when we say, is there a parent, is there a school leader, so on and so forth. But it was done intentionally for that independence factor. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure, Superintendent, if you had any comments on it as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Neill, and I do want to, you know, again, return to what my initial comments were, which was to thank you so much for continuing the work on putting together this task force. As you rightly pointed out, this is a much more intense of a process in terms of going out and trying to find and then select appropriate members, given the specified expertise that we needed for this group. And you know, we really at the outset in the policy that we voted on, that was also the product of quite a bit of work on your end, in consultation with other Council of Great City Schools members to get a view on what other districts do in this regard. We were very precise in making the statements about what type of individuals we wanted. You know, we wanted an audit professional, you know, in an independent firm. We wanted an audit professional in-house. We wanted a CPA. I think one of the other individuals that we're still recruiting for is an accounting major at a local university, so we'll continue to look for that as well. Putting together a group like that takes time, and trying to find folks that live in the city, have a vested interest, and reflect our the population of our city is no small task. And so we appreciate, quite frankly, the work that Wolf and Company and Mr. Baranowski, and as well as Mr. O'Connell, Mr. McGow, Mr. Rocket have done in furtherance of this, in tapping into your professional networks and your local networks, in finding individuals to work in this group is extraordinary and much appreciated. I'd also thank Ms. Lawrence as well. It's really a breath of fresh air to know that we're, you know, moving in lockstep between what can be viewed as sometimes an intrusion, right? It's an audit. You know, sometimes people apple up, right? When I know it when the lawyer walks through the door too. It's a similar type of reaction. But to know that we have our finance office working in lockstep with our auditors is a good thing, and ensures that we continue to have good financial practices that minimizes risk. So I apologize for putting my statement in front of other members, but Superintendent, if you had anything further to add before we move on to questions, I'd be happy to entertain that.
No, I think I just, obviously this process started before my arrival, but given my close and intimate work with Eleanor Lawrence and our finance team through certainly the student activity account process, but also knowing how ably, but yet how significant the funds are that the district manages, we welcome this process. I really appreciate the thoughtful formation of the committee. And having an extra set of eyes to advise and guide us is always beneficial to the transparency and security of the funds that we manage on behalf of our students and families. So thank you, Mr. O'Neill, and also the entire committee for putting it together. And certainly we welcome working with all the members of the committee, so thank you.
Thank you, Intern Superintendent. Dean Robinson, you had a few questions.
Yes, kind of questions and comments. I also want to thank you for your service, and I get excited when people are excited to work with us, and you state that it's a perfect fit for your skill set and the time that you have to give to us. And you're absolutely right, Mr. O'Neill can sell anything. He can sell a phone book. So I can see how this was a match made in heaven. So thank you, Mr. O'Neill, for your thoughtfulness and how you wanted to lead this effort. It's good to see your energy and expertise in this area because it is something that you're passionate about, accountability. And even the way you framed this isn't about having gotcha moments, but it really is about accountability, transparency, building trust, and it's been your brand for quite a while. So I just want to thank you for continuing to lead the same way you've been leading. I also want to thank you for the thoughtfulness behind the task force members that you have. I'm glad that there are still, I guess, a couple of options still, and you've already, Mr. O'Neill, you've already connected with our two leading ladies here who do speak about diversity often, because I think it would be helpful to think about, a man of color. And because the financial field and the risk management field can sometimes really be underrepresented for people of color, and having a brother-in-law who's, who is a partner of a firm in Tennessee, my eyes were open to this growing up. And so I was always seeing him as as we would say, the only chocolate chip in the bunch. So it is very clear that this is an underrepresented field. And so the fact that you can be intentional on identifying a man of color would show, again, as the school committee stands firmly behind being deliberate and intentional and diverse representation, it would just continue to build that brand that we are intentional when we hear different organizations and different sectors of society say we can't find people who can do X, Y, and Z in the field of color. We can continue to hold that brand of yes, we can. Yes, we can. I'm thinking of deans of MBA programs all around the city that could help you identify, maybe a student of color. So I would love to, help point you in that direction. I'm glad you have Bentley here because they lead the area. Yeah, they lead the area. So they could help us identify. I'm actually thinking already of a couple of students that I've run into at events. And then so that would be my only recommendation, is to continue still being thoughtful. And if Dr. Gray could also help you identify, I'm sure they know of their bright stars in their programs. And then just a little sidebar, I'm very encouraged, Mr. O'Neill, that you found a BLA grad and not a BLS. Wow. I saw this. And I know the roster isn't complete, so maybe you're still out there looking, but I was quite impressed. And you're right, Posse Scholar is a win-win for us. But I'm sure you're going to keep your eye out.
Thank you for that feedback, and I neglected to thank Mr. Paul Francisco at State Street, who was quite helpful in identifying Ms. Wade and spoke very highly of her. And she is extraordinarily well thought of inside State Street. And so this is a chance for her as well to build her network. So there's a lot of interactions going on here, but yes, all excellent.
I would also probably throw out, if you reach out to the partnership, which is, the
Right,
city's, Carol Fulp, who could probably give you a list of 5 names right away if you reach out, because they're the city's leading organization for recognizing talented people of color and executives in firms.
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
not sure if you also noticed that that Ms. Wade, among other things, is also president of the Boston chapter of the National Black MBA Association.
That's great.
She has a lot on her plate.
Well, thank you, Dean Robinson. Thank you once again, Ms. Lawrence, Mr. Baranowski, Mr. O'Neill, for this work. We look forward at the next meeting to taking action on the membership and getting you right to work on the charge that we've given you.
And Mr. Chair, may I also just point that this will be subject to open meeting law.
Absolutely.
The task force, as all of our task forces are. So there will be open meetings. I'm sure we will be testing the stamina. We'll be talking about internal audit for several hours at a time. So we'll be testing the stamina of Mr. Mudd and Ms. Weisenberg. But it's a fascinating subject, and we'd love to have people show up and give us thoughts.
Thank you once again. Move on now to public comment on reports. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Locanto. We have no speakers this evening. Oh, excuse me. Ms. Wiesenberg, do I see the hand?
Just quickly, Since the headmaster of EMK spoke, and as you know, that school is now in 2 facilities. One which is leased from Northeastern and is not adequate for what they do, and the other in the Farragut School, which to my and many people's dismay, this committee voted to close in 2010. It was an elementary school. You also moved Mission Hills Elementary School off of Mission Hill nearby. And so I just raise these quickly because many of the same civil rights and community organizations that spoke earlier and signed this statement about the superintendent search is a coalition that came together and will be back to ask for the 10-year master facilities plan. We want it public, transparent, and we know, and Mr. O'Neill and others of you have said, many schools are in limbo, and we don't want what I believe Mr. O'Neill said are one-off decisions. So I hope to see that soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wiesenberg.
Ms. Avery?
Thank you for hearing me again. I didn't know I'd have a chance to comment after the report, so I appreciate that very much. I want to thank Ms. Lawrence and Mr. Glora and the other woman who spoke. I don't recall her name. I know they've struggled with this issue. It's been, it was a huge shock to everybody. First thing I'd like to just point out is in reference to the materials that are available on the website in reference to the student activity counts, most of them are only available seemingly if you have a Boston Public Schools email account. For example, the only thing I was able to access as a non-employee was the new Fin 4. All of the other things, the manual and other things are not available to the general public. So I think that's something that is probably just an oversight because everybody in the district looking at it would automatically get in. So I would ask that that be fixed if possible. The thing I would mention too, what particularly struck me about the comments that were made by the finance folks is how the school should be able to adapt to this because this is the way that they disperse all of their funds now. Their budget, grants, and so forth. But this money is supposed to belong to the students. And it is supposed to be kept separate from all other school monies, which isn't something that has been done for the last 22 years. Now, finally, we're coming into compliance with the law. We've transferred the student activity funds to the agency account, and that's good. That's the way it should be. They should be completely separate. But a particular concern I have is that with this, as Dr. Uriarte said, the bureaucracy, it takes the control of the student funds out of the hands of the students and their advisors. So, for example, the prom was mentioned, how there was this marathon effort to get the check for prom. In fact, for Latin Academy, our headmaster had to get into an Uber and go to City Hall, pick up the check to be able to take to the venue in order for prom to happen. I don't think that's something we can do every year. I don't think that's something that every school who has a prom can do every year. Also,
30 seconds.
With something like prom, it's not known until a few days before how many students are going to attend. Also, the fundraising for it, the selling of tickets occurs right up until that point. So it's not really possible to ask for a check 30 days or 4 to 6 weeks in advance. Let me just read a paragraph that I didn't get a chance to say earlier. There's certainly a need for better policies and procedures to distribute student activity funds as well as other non-budgetary school funds, as the recent Ernst & Young audit of all Boston Public Schools makes evident. The observation in EY's summary report state over and over again some version of the phrase, "a policy did not exist." Besides not having a framework of policies and procedures to follow, schools were not given the proper oversight from central office through the years that would have enabled school leaders and staff to understand what their responsibilities were and to learn how to execute those responsibilities properly.
Ms. Avery?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. LaConto, that concludes our speakers this evening.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Any new business from the committee? Well, I have one item to note on new business. I want to note that, as many of you know, we received an open meeting law violation over the summer following the executive sessions that were held in June and July. I've, with your assent, am going to ask the Office of the Legal Advisor to be empowered to respond to that violation on our behalf to the complainant, who's a citizen, with a copy to the Attorney General's office. I will note, as many of you recall, that would have seen that violation, the remedy requested was release of the minutes for the June 27th and July 2nd meeting, which we have approved this evening. So I wanted to note it on the record that the violation was received, that we intend to respond, that we've taken the action that was requested, and that the Office of the Legal Advisor will take action as appropriate to respond to the complainant in short order. Any questions on that or concerns?
Mr. Chair, may I just clarify? You said the violation was received. I believe what you were saying is a claim of a potential violation was received.
I'm sorry if at the late hour I said a violation. There was no violation. There was a claim, yes, a complaint of an alleged violation. I should know better. Any other questions or concerns? All right, well, that concludes our business for this evening. As I mentioned earlier, the school committee will be holding a planning retreat on September 20th from 5 to 7 p.m. That'll be open to the public in this building. Our next regularly scheduled school committee meeting will take place on Wednesday, September 26th at 6 p.m. If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Sounds like unanimous consent. Good night. Thank you. And 10:03.
So you look like...